Cześć, dzień dobry, witajcie. Jesteśmy na takim streamie TWT dzień -1, dzień zerowy. Oczywiście od jutra będzie dużo walk, ale no jakoś gracze dotarli tutaj na ten turniej, zwłaszcza ci, o których będziemy dzisiaj rozmawiali, czyli gracze z rankingów regionalnych. Cześć, Kojot. No co, słuchajcie, nie będę przedłużał, bo tutaj jak może widzicie na ekranie film trwa 3 godziny. Dotyczy różnych graczy i będę go oglądał na przyspieszeniu. W tym momencie jest ustawione 1:15. Sprawdzam jeszcze, czy wszędzie działa. Tak jest. No i lecimy. Zobaczymy, jak wyjdzie. Jakbyście mieli jakieś pytania, dawajcie znać.
Hi, I'm Seth. I'm not
Przepraszam, wykrzyknik info, nie, wykrzyknik link, przepraszam, na Twitchu, jeśli chcecie link do tego filmu, który tutaj wspólnie oglądamy. Gdyby było za głośno, też dajcie znać.
champion. I'm not the tournament champion. I don't even really play this game competitively. Simply I am
Film jest na
most of you,
kanale
a
SESujin,
fan of
w razie
Tekken,
czego.
fan of the
Ja
competitive
nie
scene.
znam
I like
gościa, no,
watching
ale
tournaments, I
wrzucił
like
3 godziny
commentating
film,
over them.
więc
And
obejrzyjmy.
because of that, it makes me sad to see what's happening in the Tekken competitive scene in the Tekken World Tour. There have been a lot of allegations recently of cheating happening in the Tekken World Tour, and a lot of this talk is
Coraz
really been
więcej
taking out steam.
tych
I myself have been looking
teorii,
into the cheating allegations in Tekken for a couple of months now. Cheating in
kilka
Tekken,
miesięcy
accusations
patrzę,
of cheating
okej.
with Dojo system is not new. This has been going on.
Bo ja się spodziewałem, że on po prostu nagrał tak film od ręki, nie wiem, zaczął nagrywać na przykład na początku tego miesiąca, ale nie, on przez kilka miesięcy zbierał kwity, więc
For a very,
okej.
very long time. But in my investigation into this, I have found that the problem with cheating, alleged cheating in Tekken is a lot more rampant than anyone knows. I have compiled a 75-page document outlining all of my findings in the Tekken World
Ten
Tour
dokument jest
Dojo
z
system,
общego
the
filmu.
regional leaderboard, the allegations of cheating, the potential misconduct from players and TOs alike, and I will have that linked down in the description below. In this video, I'm going to be discussing all of the findings that I outline in that document. I'm going to be talking about multiple regions that have engaged in activity where they
Tutaj będzie
are
też
not
fragment o
reporting
Polsce,
DQs, they are
ale już
manipulating the bracket, and at
wiemy, o
times
co tam chodzi,
there
nawet
may
komentarz
be
dodałem
tournament
wczoraj.
organizers that are simply just lazy in their reporting. All the same, it still leads to problems with the Tekken World Tour system. It still leads to problems with the regional leaderboard. And because of how rampant and deep-rooted the problem is, there is no real good solution. There's no real fix to it, which is one of the things I want to highlight in this video and in the document that I have written. Past just that, though, Bandai Namco has also not been properly reporting dojo tiers. I suspect that the reason for this is because they do not have human reviewers.
O, to jest human reviewers mają, tak? Ludzie na to patrzą, natomiast te tiery czasem są niepoprawne. Cześć. To prawda, dlatego że zdarzyło się, że gdzieś tam na turnieju było więcej DQ niż powinno. Było tyle DQ, że turniej powinien zejść do niższego progu, a tak się nie stało, no ale to już nie jest kwestia organizatorów, tylko Bandai Namco.
Reviewing any of the dojos that are submitted, and they are giving out points automatically to the competitors that compete in these dojos. There's going to be more information on that.
Czy mam swoje top 3, kto może wygrać TWT finał? Multgold, Farzin, Arslan. To jest moja top 3. Tych, którzy według mnie mają największe szanse, a kto chciałbym, żeby doszedł daleko, Ni, Low-High, Rangchu i może jak będziemy oglądali jeszcze w kolejnych dniach te grupy, to powiem więcej.
Coming up soon. However, what I want to ask you all first is if you find this information valuable, if you like what comes out of this, I would please ask you whether you share this video or the Google Doc to share it. I'm making this simply because I want the dojo system to be better. I've always had problems with the Tekken World Tour, the regional system, the leaderboard system, the way that regions are defined. The entire way the system works is incredibly flawed. And I want to do this to try to spot change. I want to outline and highlight the problems that are with the Tekken World Tour dojo system, and I want them to be able to improve it. So whether you share this video, whether you share the Google document, whether you just share your thoughts on what is going to come out of this, I would appreciate anything that you could do
Jutro
to help
pamiętajcie o
get this
12.
information out. This is
Dobra,
by far the
intro
biggest
się
project I've ever
kończy,
undertaken
kontekst.
in my entire life, and everything that I've done throughout this video and the document was done by myself, and I'm doing it out of a passion and a love for the game, and I truly want everything to get better
Może jeszcze
going
troszkę
into the future.
przyspieszę.
So for those of you who may be watching who don't know Tekken World Tour, the system, the dojo system, all of that stuff, let me explain to you some context behind how all of this
Dobra, to jest tak. Ten rozdział dotyczy tego, jak turnieje dojo działają. Ja nie będę tego oglądał, to jest kilka minut. Przedstawiałem kiedyś tam informacje o tym, jak ten system dojo działa. W skrócie mamy, dla tych, którzy nie wiedzą, pewnie większość z was wie, no ale może będzie oglądał ktoś, kto akurat nie wie. Mamy 4 kategorie turniejów TWT w sezonie zasadniczym. Master Plus, Master, Challenger i Dojo. Pierwsze 3 są organizowane we współpracy z Bandai Namco i też tam Bandai Namco daje nagrody pieniężne bodajże. Natomiast jeśli chodzi o Dojo, to są turnieje organizowane przez organizatorów w różnych regionach. No i mamy 15 regionów, z których gdzie z każdego jeden gracz awansuje do finałów Tekken World Tour, jeśli jest pierwszy w swoim rankingu. Wtedy liczy się 6 turniejów dojo, natomiast jeśli chodzi o rankingi globalne, czy ranking globalny, bo jest jeden, no to 4 najlepsze dojo się liczą, więc i tutaj te dojo są ważne. Będzie tutaj przykład RF-a, u którego te punkty były bardzo ważne, bo jak wczoraj sprawdzałem, gdyby punkty te dojo w ogóle nie były liczone u żadnego z graczy, to RF byłby 25 w rankingu TWT. Więc przejdźmy sobie tutaj do tego kolejnego rozdziału.
However, I have reason to believe that Bandai Namco not only does not investigate these dojos, but does not have any manual human reviewers at all. I have reason to believe that all of the reviews for the dojo events
I ja nie zgadzam się z nim, ale jestem ciekawy jego argumentacji. Podejrzewam, że bo wiem o sytuacjach, kiedy ktoś na przykład odrzucił, ktoś z Bandai Namco odrzucił turniej dojo, dlatego że na przykład jednej walki z top 8 brakowało.
Bandai Namco are done automatically. This comes from multiple discrepancies in terms of how dojos are labeled tier-wise. For example, there are some dojos in here that go down to 62 players, but are still labeled as a 64-player event. There are multiple instances of players dropping below the minimum threshold for a dojo, but then still being assigned the higher tier dojo status, but then other dojos that drop 1 below the number and are bumped down to the lower tier. This inconsistency points to me that there is either some sort of disjointment at Bandai Namco, whoever's human reviewing these, or you have human reviewers that are being lazy, or the process is automated. I lean more towards the process being automated, and I'll show you here now. This is Saudi E-League. This is a tournament series that is a little bit confusing to look at in StartGG because this is...
To jest w ogóle masakra. Jak ja patrzyłem na te turnieje, to oni tam potrafili mieć 4 turnieje tego samego dnia, ale chyba albo żaden z nich, albo tylko jeden był TWT Dojo, bo też jest tak, że TWT Dojo nie mogą być... jeden organizator może chyba raz w tygodniu zorganizować dojo, coś takiego.
A ongoing tournament series that lasted for a couple of months, and this tournament series that lasted for this long, all of the tournaments throughout the course of a couple of months are all listed on this one StartGG page, so it can be a little bit confusing to look at. Where we're going to be looking at are these 2 tournaments right here. And that is going to be SEL Fighting Season 4 Major and SEL Fighting Season 4 Riyadh Clash number 1. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Both of these tournaments were listed on the Tekken Bandai Namco Tekken World Tour leaderboards as being, as you can see,
Swoją drogą ten system jest brzydki do patrzenia.
96%
Brzydki do patrzenia, brzydki, no bo jak do patrzenia...
events. Now, these events, the name of this is wrong because it looks like that Rife here has just participated in the same tournament 3 times, but this is because this is the, as you can see, the homepage of this tournament series. Looking at the dates here.
No właśnie, bo zwykle jest tak, że macie turniej czy macie wydarzenie i w jego ramach, na przykład w trakcie weekendu, czy na przełomie kilku dni i są różne turnieje. Natomiast to, co oni zrobili, to jest jedna strona, taki landing page I tam mają podpięte turnieje na przestrzeni całego sezonu, co jest dość konfundujące.
We can see that this is from October 3rd and this is from September 20th, which line up with the two dates on these two. So these are the two tournaments that this is referring to. You may have already seen a discrepancy here, though. Again, you can see this is a 96-person dojo. However, this one, SEL Fighting Season 4 Riyadh Clash #1, has 84 entries.
Bo właśnie, bo to nie jest tak, że oni mieli, a tutaj w ogóle 78 graczy, czyli oni mieli 84 osoby, ale 78, czyli 78 finalnie było, czyli pewnie 6 zostało zdyskwalifikowanych. Czyli to oznacza, że prawdopodobnie w momencie, kiedy turniej wszedł do systemu, to był 96+, ale potem oni usunęli uczestników i to nie spadło. O kurde.
This is 12 less entrants than the 96-person threshold, yet it still
miałem o
attained
tym pojęcia.
96-person status. You can see here, this is from October 3rd, 2025, and this was October 3rd, 2025. So this is the tournament that it is referring to. Now, the reason for this is a similar reason why this one has a discrepancy. You can see that this says it has 141 entrants, and you see September 20th, 2025, which is the same.
Ale nie wiem, czy o tym powie. Tu jest 82 osoby, czyli to znaczy, że oni musieli usunąć 59?
See that this says it has 141 entrants, and you see September 20th,
Muszę się napić.
2025, which is the same
W
as
ogóle
it
nowy
is here.
monsterek w
This
żabce.
one looks like it has far more entrants than the required 96 to meet the dojo threshold. However, when you look at the actual bracket, and if you look at the standings, you'll notice that it says 82 players.
No właśnie.
Even though it says there's 141 entrants, there's only 82 players in this bracket. And when you click at view bracket, you can see that there's 83, A4, A5, A6, 87 players that are listed in the pools, yet 141 entrants. Before we focus on this one from October 3rd, let's focus on the one from September 20th. So this is possibly a mistake that could be made. Now, it would be a very lazy mistake for a human reviewer to make, because all you need to do is click on the bracket and see clearly this tournament goes below 96 players. But if you just click on it, you see that there's 141 entrants. You go, okay, that's good enough. Put it at 96 and then go home for the day, or whatever it is that the reviewer might do. This can make sense. And when you initially look at this, looking at how this says 82 players, this might not be where you're looking at. So even though it's very lazy and clearly this tournament has been misrepresented, it's a mistake that you can make. The other thing, when you click on Rice profile as well, when you
Dobra, czy system Dojo można naprawić tutaj w tej sytuacji? No można poprawić, żeby to automatycznie się zbierało, żeby no na pewno jest jakieś API do StarGG
it says that he got first place out of 82
mają
players,
zresztą połączone
not
konta.
141. So clearly this tournament was grossly mislabeled. Now, one of the strange things about this tournament as well is it says that there's 83, A4, A5, A6, 87 players in bracket. But when you actually look at the standings, it says that there's 82 players. So which one's correct? It says there's 82 players. It says there's 87 players. That's a difference of 5 players. And that says there's 87 players and 141 entrants. So what's correct here? What's actually going on with this? And the other weird thing as well is that there is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs, right? There's a total of 5 DQs in winners. There's 4 DQs in losers, but those 5 DQs account for the difference in...
Yes. Albo źle powiedział, albo coś nie tak, bo jak macie 5 wygranych, to w przegranych musi być co najmniej taka sama liczba. Dobra, może nie do końca, bo można robić tak, że są dwa podejścia. Albo robimy DQ od razu tak, że jesteś w wygranych, dostajesz DQ i w przegranych od razu jesteś zaznaczony jako DQ, albo jesteś DQ w ramach danej walki, ale potem masz jeszcze szansę w ramach przegranych.
Between the 82 players that's listed as being participants and the players that are in the bracket. So that's why there's the difference there. But how does this difference between 87 players or 82 players and 141 entrants come to be? That, personally, I don't know. But whatever the case, it's some problem with StartGG, and that's what it's seeing. So now let's move over to the Season 4 Riyadh Clash #1. And this one doesn't have that problem. I mean, you look at it, right when you look at it, it says there's 84 entrants. You look at the bracket, it says there's 78 players here. It says there's 84 players here. No matter how you cut it, this tournament does not have 96 plus players. No one who's human reviewing this tournament is going to look at this and then say that it's a 96 plus event. At best, it's going to be labeled as a 64 plus event. The problem is that if you go to the attendees and you look for Rife.
Wiesz co? Nie tylko StarGG, bo są jeszcze co najmniej dwa inne systemy, które oni akceptują. Challenge oraz się chyba nazywa Tonamel, taki japoński system.
In the attendees, Rife is listed in this tournament, SCL Fighting Season 4 Real Clash #1, as getting first out of 115 players.
Co?
Now, I don't know about you, but if I was a human...
A co jeśli Saudyjczycy... Teoria, nie daję zarzutów, tak? Zadam pytanie, tak jak kiedyś było w paskach na TVP. Czy możliwe jest, że Saudyjczycy wiedzieli o tym, że system StarGG gubi się przy ustawieniu turniejów w taki sposób i dlatego tak je zasetapowali? Ja tylko pytam.
Reviewer for the dojos, and I was determining the placement for the dojos. This is not where I would be looking. I would not be looking at an individual player's .gg profile for the event and then look at this number specifically. But that seems to be how they got this number, because this is the only number, this is the only time where this number goes above 96 on the entire .gg page. And you can see here as well, it's also listed here as getting first out of 141. But if I actually click on this, it says that it's first out of 78th place. So there is something going on with this particular tournament on .gg that has really messed with the numbers. And what exactly has gone on here, why this is happening, I don't know. I assume it's something with them generating the bracket before people couldn't enter anymore. And because of that, you had players who entered into the tournament after the bracket was generated. They didn't regenerate the bracket, or they didn't redo it. And because of that, you had a lot of people that entered into this tournament who couldn't have participated because the bracket had already been generated. And yet, despite that, this again was labeled as a 96-player event. To me, this indicates that there are no human reviewers for any of the dojos. If there was a human reviewer for this, I cannot see how a human reviewer, when looking at this tournament, would ever look at this as a 96.
No moja teoria jest ewentualnie taka właśnie, że najpierw było ponad 96 osób i to wpadło do danej kategorii, dlatego że widziałem takie sytuacje, no, przyglądając się naszym turniejom, że turniej był na przykład 16+, i dołączyło, nie wiem, potem jeszcze 20 osób, było powyżej 32 i wciąż był 16+, bo oni to zmieniali ręcznie. Więc tutaj mogło być takie opóźnienie i na przykład może być tak, że przez to opóźnienie oni już potem tego nie aktualizują po tym, jak się turniej odbędzie.
Player event. The only way that they could have looked at this tournament and labeled it as a 96 player once again is to click on attendees, is to click on someone who had registered and played for this tournament, where there are a lot more ones that don't pertain to the actual dojo event that's happening, and then look at, once again, if I put in Rice's name, and then look at this number specifically. I don't think that happened. Instead, what I think is happening is that Bandai Namco has some sort of automated software to look at the players' connected .gg profiles, look at the events, the dojos that they have attended, and then scrape this specific number from this attendees page for the specific tournament, and then apply that both to the dojo and the dojo tier, and then apply their points for the tournament based on that. That would be how this page knows that he got first in this tournament. It's not a human reviewing the top 8 bracket, distributing the points manually. Instead, it's some sort of automated process that's determining how big the dojo is, what place the player got, scraping all of the data automatically from this automated process, and they use this specific page to automate that process. And this would explain a lot of things. This is going to explain later on in this video and in the document that I wrote on why exactly you have so many instances of tournaments being very obvious with some sort of alleged cheating, but Bandai Namco isn't doing anything about it. One thing that has become very well known is a tournament that Rife played in that was using AI-generated names. And a lot of people were wondering, how can someone look at this and think that it's legitimate? And the answer
Pewnie
probably is that no one's
nie
looking
patrzyli
at
tak
any of these dojos. No one's
głęboko.
actually verifying these dojos. And that opens up the floodgates to abuse when this becomes known. Because if you can manipulate the Start GG page in order for your tournament to look like this, then you can make...
Dobra, wiecie co, ja to przewinę. No bo ma swoją
the
teorię.
number one players in the region, that they treat the top 20 on the Tekken World Tour leaderboards the same as Timmy, who's 30th on the leaderboard, and he got 5th at his 16-person event, is asinine. It's ridiculous, but that is what they are doing in effect. They are having the same level, and not in a good way, of scrutiny and care for people that are at the number 1 spot as with people that are on the number 30 spot and aren't even really trying to compete. And that is a really, really bad precedent. So now we're going to move on to the individual regions, and we are going to be looking at the number 1 player in these individual regions. I'm going to be talking about these regions in order from what I most think should be looked into by Bandai Namco to what I least think should be looked into by Bandai Namco. What I'm going to say, though, is twofold. One, we should not assume that players in these regions are cheating. While there may be evidence of misconduct, and there may be very compelling evidence of intent, that is something for Bandai Namco to decide. I don't think it's right for us to go on a witch hunt and assume that players are cheating when we have no concrete proof. How would you feel if a bunch of people, if the entire Tekken...
Jak to domniemanie niewinności, tak? Czy po angielsku innocent until proven guilty.
Community started labeling you as a cheater for what someone else did that you didn't know about, and you know you weren't cheating. It would feel awful, right? And because of that, we shouldn't be doing that to other people ourselves. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be presenting the evidence as I know it and I see it, and I'm going to hope that it gets to Bandai Namco and allow them to be able to make a decision themselves. The other thing that I'm going to be doing because of that is I'm not going to be referring to the individual number 1 player in the region. Instead, I will be referring to the region itself. Because the problem really lies within the region, within an individual within the region, if there is alleged cheating, of doing this, and it's not on the player, and putting everything on the player detracts from the actual problem that's going on. And on top of that, it also allows the actual perpetrator, the actual person of wrongdoing, to avoid consequence. So because of that, I'm not going to be referring to the player themselves when I don't have to. Now, that exception is going to be here for the Asia 1 region because the player in question is very important to this investigative report. So the number 1 player in the Asia...
To ja tylko powiem jedną rzecz. Jeśli oglądaliście mój film z profilami graczy, z sylwetkami graczy, no to wiecie. Ale jeśli nie, to na to tam zwróciłem uwagę. Nie mogłem znaleźć żadnej walki z turnieju tego gracza.
One region is this player, D. Chingiz. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. And this player on his Tekken World Tour profile, the dojos that he's played in, you can see are mostly on challenge, and he has gotten first play in almost every single one of these events that he's...
Właśnie challenge. Challenge ma to do siebie, że w przeciwieństwie do Start GG pozwala na tworzenie turniejów dla graczy bez profili, a na Start GG chyba nie można.
Gone to. The big problem that is with D. Chingiz is that most of these events have exactly the amount of players required for the dojo and no DQs. That's a very consistent thing that you see throughout all of these tournaments, is that they have just...
Oszukiwać to trzeba umieć, no.
At or just above the required amount of players for the dojo tier, and they have 0 DQs. Maybe if they have DQs, they have like 1 or 2, but it's always just enough to be able to stay above the initial tier of the dojo. There are also times with the brackets on challenge that the players are listed as going 0, -1, which usually indicates a disqualification or some sort of automatic win, or if the player won but didn't report the score. The other problem with listing players as going 0, -1 is that we don't know if it's a DQ, we don't know if it was just a match loss for some odd reason. We don't...
Swoją drogą takie chipsy bananowe polecam ze sklepu Action.
Know why they do that. And so you can't assume if it's not marked as a disqualification, that is a disqualification, which could be an attempt to mislead any human reviewers, if only there was any, into not realizing that those are DQs. But before we get into that, let's first look at the Start GG page for Comic Con Astana it is the only tournament that was hosted on SPECJALNY. And this is really going to help us understand the pattern with a lot of these
99
tournaments,
graczy,
because
okej.
they all fall into the same pattern. You can see there are 99 entrants in this tournament, and when you look at the pools, there are very few DQs. Here we have 2 partial DQs of players who up in
Czekajcie. Komik kon Astana. Aż zobaczę. Jak to wyglądało. Miał jakiegoś komikona, dobra.
the winner side went 0-2 and 0-2. We have here, again, 1 partial DQ here, and then they went 0-2 in losers. But again, no DQs, no DQs, 2 partial DQs once again, but not full DQs. We have 1 single DQ from this player, Citrus, and that's it. And also, notice the amount of 0-2s in these brackets as well. 0-2s, especially early in the bracket, is a really good indicator that DQs are not being reported correctly. This is a very unusual amount of games to just go 0-2. Because of how seeding works, players should be at times close to one another before they get eliminated. If you have a lot of 0-2s early in the bracket, that sort of indicates, when you have enough of them, that the players weren't actually there and didn't actually play. And you see that, again, there are so, like, this bracket.
Ja tutaj się nie do końca zgodzę, dlatego że 2-0 w pierwszej rundzie często oznacza po prostu, że no ludzie, powiedzmy sobie szczerze, randomy, żurki, niedzielni gracze, nazywajcie ich jak chcecie, przyszli na turniej, nie zostali rozstawieni. Załóżmy, turniej jest podzielony na, czy uczestnicy są podzieleni na 2 części. Gracze, którzy ogarniają, i jakieś takie żurki, które sobie przyszły. No i może być tak, że takie żurki akurat trafiły zawsze na gracze, którzy coś ogarniają i dlatego polecieli 0-2, więc ja tutaj bym uważał.
Look how many 0-2s. There was 1 game that went 1-2. A single one. Look at this one. Not a single game in winners went 1-2. This is the only game in this entire bracket that went 1-2. And so when you look at this, once again, there's only 1 game here that went 1-2. When you look at this, it becomes a very clear indicator that a lot of
Żurki? A czemu na pasach mam uważać? To jest w ogóle słowo, które jest na stronie Tekkena od ponad 20 lat. I nawet w Tekkenie 8 się pojawia. Raz albo 2. Czy mam przygotowaną flagę Polski? Nie mam. Ja nawet nie wiem, czy mam flagę Polski w domu. A co, z jakiego powodu mam mieć przygotowaną? Polak wygra TWT?
there is misreporting of DQs, right? And the other thing as well, because there's only 1 full DQ, that brings the total effective amount of participants in this tournament down to 98. If the partial DQs were also accounted for, like here, we have 3 partial DQs. This is one of the most ridiculous brackets I've ever seen in my life. You have this game where this player went 2-0, and then in winners quarters...
Nie wiem, czy mam w ogóle flagę Polski, ale nie, to na sobotę. Na sobotę założę tę koszulkę Lili, może być?
This player Fisher disqualified, and then in winners semi, the person who won.
Ach, dobra. Dobra, Mortal Kombatant, bo ja nie słyszałem dużo o tej sytuacji. W ogóle nie skumałem, że o tym chodzi.
2-0 in round 1, just decided, you know what? I'm gonna go for a bathroom break and never come back. And then they come back and lose his quarters, and then they get out of the tournament 1-2. So they were here, and then they got a bye, and then they just never came back. But then they still came back within like 5 minutes of being disqualified to be able to play and lose his quarters, and then they lost. It just doesn't, like, it doesn't make sense. So then you have this person, La Passion, who goes 2-0 in round 1, and then when his quarters, they're just like, I'm gonna go.
No, ale słuchajcie. Ja to się z nim nie zgadzam. Będzie też coś podobnego w przypadku Polski, ale chodzi o to, że był tutaj turniej Comic Con Astana, tak? Byliście na Pyrkonie, Poznań Game Arena. To bardziej w sumie Pyrkon niż Poznań Game Arena, ale jeszcze mniejsza pewna liczba osób, która gra. Więc przychodzą ludzie, ktoś sobie zagrał, poszedł, nie pojawił się. No tak może być. Moim zdaniem tutaj autor jest w błędzie.
I'm leaving, I'm done. And so they DQ, but then they come back in losers and they play in losers.
Mogło tak być, że poszedł, miał zaproszeniem sraczkę i wrócił.
and he goes 0-2. And you have the same game with Fisher, who DQ'd against a whack. So they, again, they are the higher seed in the bracket. They just DQ. They just don't play. But then they do and loses and goes there. You see how, like, I don't think I need to go on, but you see how strange this entire thing is, right? So this is, again, a common...
Chłop cieszy się kotletem, ale jakim? Chabowym? Milonym? Devolajem? Trochę nieprecyzyjnie mówisz, Oirin.
thing that you see throughout this, but this is a very clear indicator of disqualifications not being reported properly. So now let's go over to some of the brackets in challenge. And so let's look at Almighty Running 4. Almighty Running 4 has...
No tak, chłop jest z USA, więc nie wie, że coś takiego jak Kazachstan istnieje. Więc nie wie, że tu chodzi o Maaty. Devolaj, no.
exactly 64 players.
Nie jest kompletnym graczem, nie ma pojęcia jak masówki wyglądają, no okej. Natomiast mógłby pogadać z kimś, zapytać, ej, co myślisz o tym i o tym, nie?
And in this tournament, you can see that there is not a single listed disqualification. Not one. Not one disqualification in this entire tournament.
Tu się w pełni zgadzam. Jak duża szansa jest, że macie turniej na 64 osoby, dokładnie na 64 osoby, gdzie to jest ten tier i nikt nie jest dyskwalifikowany.
So 64 players signed up for this tournament. Every single one of them made it and every single one of them played.
Właśnie, na każdym takim turnieju.
This just simply does not happen. This is not normal for a bracket with 64 players to not have any disqualifications. Now, when you look at one tournament, this can happen. It's improbable, but it can happen. But where it becomes a pattern and where it becomes suspicious is when multiple tournaments do this. And so we have this tournament that's doing it, and we have the one on Start.gg, the Comic Con tournament that's also doing this. If we look at Almighty Running 3, this was listed as a 96-person dojo. It has 99 players, but again, not a single disqualification. And you know if it's a disqualification on challenge if there's a strike through the name. Instead, what we see is players going -1-0. You see it
-1. W ogóle, dlaczego to się da tyle ustawić?
here. You see that's one player here. You see another one here, so that's 2. You see another one here, so that's 3. So that's exactly 3 players, which would bring, after that, if you count those as DQs, down to
Dokładnie, Irene, dokładnie.
exactly 96 players. But even regardless of that,
A on w ogóle na tym turnieju zajął drugie miejsce, a nie pierwsze.
these players aren't being marked as DQ'd. When a player goes 0-1, that doesn't necessarily mean DQ. That could mean that the score wasn't reported.
Tylko przypominam, będę też jeszcze przypominał kilka razy. Jutro widzimy się o godzinie 12. W piątek o 9:30, w sobotę o 10:00 i w niedzielę znowu o 9:30. Jutro pewnie tak z 7 godzin, a w kolejne tak po 10.
Correctly, a player was giving a win. Whatever the reason for it is, this doesn't necessarily indicate a DQ. And so by marking a player who DQ is going negative.
Tak jest, Grzenio, zapraszam cię. A w ogóle wyślę link może. Bo dzisiaj wrzuciłem przewodnik Stream Monstera na finały TWT, więc jeśli nie oglądaliście, to zapraszam.
1-0, that could potentially, maybe you can make an argument that is the tournament organizers trying to mislead someone into thinking a DQ isn't actually a DQ. And also, if you're just glancing at the bracket, this is a very difficult thing to just spot if you're reviewing.
A tutaj w ogóle jest ktoś, widzicie te numerki? Tam ktoś, nie wiem czy w Kazachstanie są numery PESEL, ale to wygląda jak numer PESEL. Już może troszkę za, nie wiem czy za długi.
This. And if you
A zwróciłem uwagę, bo tam się zaczyna na 87. No zobaczcie, on był tutaj drugi.
have to review who knows how many dojos, who knows how many.
I tutaj jest znowu takie samo top 3. Ciekawe, czy w kolejnym też będzie top 3. Inna kolejność? No wtedy Drinkis był pierwszy, tutaj nie wiem, Nurakun drugie miejsce, Blismoke trzecie.
Tournaments in a day, if again you're assuming you're a human reviewer, you're gonna look at this, you're gonna glance at, do I see any DQs? Control F, DQ, nope, okay, move on. And so that is another problem with what's going on with this. And again, you can see here, Almighty Running 2, 65 players. Again, this was labeled as a 64-player event, and no DQs. You have multiple players here, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 5. You have 5 players listed as going -1-0, which we can interpret as being DQs, which would bring it to 60, but...
Oni będą grali w sobotę. Grzenio, jak skończy się ten stream, To obejrzyj proszę film, którego link wysłałem przed chwilą. Tam omawiam to jest kiedy, ale jutro są grupy regionalne, w piątek są grupy globalne. Kurde, za każdym się waham, jakiego słowa użyć. W sobotę jest LCQ, a w niedzielę finały. Top 20.
These weren't marked as DQs, and you can see that they're marked here in losers as well, but these weren't marked DQs because they were not properly marked. So if we assume that these are DQs, which we should, this should have been a 48-person event, but because of how they labeled the DQs, it changes how a reviewer or Bandai Namco's automated system looks at this and says, yeah, there were 65 players and 0 DQs, which could again be an attempt to mislead, and if it is, well, it worked. And so we've looked at enough of these
Dzięki Coyote, jakby co, wykrzyknik bracket działa już na ten link.
events from DChingas to see that there is a pattern that's going on. There are exactly the amount of entrants that you need for the dojo status or just above an abnormal amount of disqualifications, and that is reason to look into these events. However, there are a couple of more things about this that open up a new door of possibility.
Nie mogli dać DQ na challenge'u? Nie, ale wiesz to on tu powiedział, że powinno się, że taki coś powinien być przekreślony. Crossing them out in the bracket and out of forfeiting their matches, czyli removal also revokes score editing and reporting permissions, czyli oni powinni być przekreśleni w ramach DQ.
One of these things is this funny little button here. This is the log button. This is going to tell you who reported.
Zobaczcie, to chyba jest inne. Nie wiem w sumie, czy to było to.
Scores for the tournament.
W każdym razie top 3 znowu to samo.
And so, if I click on this log button and we look at the logs for this tournament, Almighty running 4, you're going to notice something very interesting.
Almighty.
The number 1 player in the Asia 1 region has been reporting scores for this tournament. In fact, it's not just a couple of scores. It's almost all of them. Almost every score that
To są przesłanki. To nie są dowody, ale jestem ciekawy, jak jutro będzie.
was reported by DChingas, the number 1 player in the Asia 1 region. I counted the amount of reports that he made in this log. There are 3 parts in this log that are create the tournament, start the tournament, end of the tournament, and this other person in the log, so that brings the log total down to 129, and this person reported 12 games.
12. Czy nie z tyłu składa się top 8? Top 8, który musi być streamowane? Pomyślmy.
Which means DChingas reported 117 of 129 games in this tournament that he is listed as also winning. And this also means that the reason why there are 0 DQs reported is because DChingas himself did not
Wiecie co? Chyba w przyszłym roku pojadę sobie na finały TWT.
report the DQs because he reported all of the games at the beginning of the tournament. Further, if we look at DChinga's profile, we can see that if we look at tournaments, he is listed as an admin for Almighty Running 4 and Almighty Running 3. And if we look at Almighty Running 3, while it's not as egregious, you're going to see he is also reporting scores for this tournament. Not at the same frequency, but he is also reporting scores for this one as well. Now, this behavior
Spoko. Mam załatwioną ST. Teraz nie wiem, czy to jest na 3 lata, czy na ile. Więc damy radę.
seems to have been limited to these 2 events, but still, this
Chyba że zrobią w Minnesocie.
is simply not okay. I don't think I need to explain why. But it gets a little bit deeper than that as well. You see, there's even more to uncover about the Asia 1 region. If I go back to Almighty Running 4 and I look at the
Znaczy, no tak. Jest to, no.
This player, Fazbear. Fazbear here also is an admin and organized all of these challenge tournaments, all of them. And if we look at the Comic-Con Astana 2025.gg page, the admin for this tournament is none other than Fazbear
Muszę go tam
himself. But it
przyspieszyć.
gets even deeper than that. You can see that Fazbear, next to his name, has this thing that says Lotus. And if you look at Fazbear's Twitter, it says he is the player and owner
O, no proszę, gratulacje, gratulacje.
of Lotus Esports FGC, which is an esports team from Kazakhstan. And if you look at the Chingiz's Twitter profile, it says Lotus Esports Tekken 8 player. So this may be the reason and give us motive as to why the brackets have allegedly not reported the DQs, have inflated the numbers, have inflated the Tekken World Tour Dojo number, and importantly, why D Chingiz was given admin role in Almighty Running 3 and Almighty Running 4, the last two tournaments of the Tekken World Tour regional leaderboards, which gave him an extra 200 points, firmly placing him above Fardi. It is very clear and undisputable motive and evidence that there is something happening in the Asia 1 region.
Ale w ogóle Fardin, mnie tak bawi ten nick.
That needs to be
To jest taki Fardin tylko fartem.
investigated, regardless of if there is cheating or not happening. This is not okay. There is clear, irrefutable evidence that D Chingiz was given admin role in the tournaments he played in and won, and that he was messing with the leaderboards. He was responsible for the leaderboards, and because of that, he is the one responsible for not properly reporting DQs. Now, could it be that someone else was using his account? Yes, sure, that is possible. Could it be that D Chingiz himself was not the one that was actually making those reports, and it was someone else using his account? Yes, but why was his account given admin role? Why was his account able to do this? Why wouldn't someone else be using their own account or a different account? Why would they be using D Chingiz's account? Why would that be happening?
Ale nie wiem, czy może on powiedział tutaj wcześniej, tu gdzie przeskoczyliśmy, ale nie mówi o streamach, że te streamy są niedostępne. Bandai Namco powinno pobierać te filmy, udostępnić na jakiś serwer, albo dać po prostu organizatorom miejsce, żeby te filmy wrzucali.
This is something that needs to be looked into. There's just no refuting it. There's no arguing with it. The evidence is very
Grzenio, chodzi o cherry picking.
clear and concise. It is very laid out, and because of that, Bandai Namco needs to look into this. What is happening here simply is not okay, and there is no argument you can make that
Po prostu Sharp chciał się pochwalić znajomością języka angielskiego.
it is okay. Now let's move on from Asia 1 and let's start talking about what is a little bit more in the forefront when it comes to the scandal and these allegations, and that is Rife and Alidar. Now, Alidar is who really kind of kicked this whole thing off. There have been a lot of allegations and finger pointing from the entire competitive scene at Oceania, at Alidar, and at Guam. And the evidence that is presented for both him and Rife are very damning. There is a lot to talk about, and there has been a lot that has been ongoing since season 1 with Alidar that is important to talk about and is important for Bandai Namco to investigate. At minimum, even if Alidar and Guam as a whole have not done anything wrong, there's still an explanation that is owed by Alidar, by the Guam community, and especially from Bandai Namco. But what I'm going to reiterate is that we don't have clear evidence that either of these players were knowledgeable or complicit in what's happening in their regions. I don't think it's right to start dogpiling on and attacking these individual players when we do not know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, that these players were complicit. That is for something for Bandai Namco to decide. What we should be doing as players and a community is highlighting and presenting the evidence of what could potentially be going on in these regions, present that, and then have Bandai Namco do an investigation themselves. And if we can't trust Bandai Namco to do that, if we can't trust Bandai Namco to be able to do their own investigative work, make their own decisions, make their own judgment, make a statement, then the entire Tekken World Tour Dojo cannot be seen as a competitive event. And at that point, we shouldn't be putting any weight on...
Ale czekaj, chłop emigrował na TGS i Ice go w końcu dopadło? O co chodzi?
The Tekken World Tour, the regional leaderboard, the entire system as a whole, because at that point the system is so far broken that the issue extends beyond just these two players. Most of the information in this section isn't going to have been uncovered by me. It's going to have been uncovered by other Tekken players, other people who have been investigating and reporting on this, and I feel like it's important to also highlight other people's efforts into uncovering what's going on with the Tekken World Tour. And so we're going to start with Rife. And I'm going to read out this Twitter post from Black Panther that outlines the issues with Rife very well. I'm raising serious concerns regarding Rife's Tekken Dojo events and their impact on Tekken World Tour qualification. Upon examination, it is obvious that he heavily inflated the numbers, leading to a maximum number of points. During Rife's Jeddah Dojo 4, a large
Ale, bo Sesudin mówisz TGS, bo chodzi o Tekken God Supreme czy Tokyo Game Show? Ja się pogubiłem, bo pomyślałem, że może ten gość wyjechał do Japonii, zwłaszcza biorąc pod uwagę to, co jest tutaj.
number of .gg accounts were created simultaneously. These accounts follow an identical AI-like naming pattern with no meaningful variation. The chances of over 50 people signing up with these similar names is extremely low. I can tell you, I counted the amount of accounts that were like this. It was well over 60. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 62 and 64.
Ty chcesz powiedzieć, że Sharp jest z Ice?
There are so many that it's hard for me to be able to accurately count them, but it's within that neighborhood. It's more than half. That's the point. Additionally, the event shows 0 disqualifications despite being a fully populated 96-player dojo, which is highly unusual. Multiple notable players who consistently place well in most tournaments at very unusual placements. What makes the situation more concerning is that the same naming patterns reappear in a dojo held 2 weeks earlier using different accounts but identical names. The similarities are difficult to overlook. You have identical name structures, very consistent formatting, and clear signs of auto-generation with no attempt to mask. These details are easily verifiable by reviewing the brackets.
I no, tylko już powiem, jak kiedyś robiliśmy w pracy konta z Team na jakiś projekt, no to oczywiście nie mogliśmy podać nazwy tego projektu w nazwie Contest Team, to wymyślaliśmy. No sam robimy jakieś, nie wiem, Grave Digger, Orange Banana i tak dalej, jakieś tam numerki jeszcze dodawaliśmy. Był fan z tego.
And the attached screenshots. The fact that these dojos were proved at all shows either gross incompetence or an intentional sweeping under the rug of the situation in order to avoid negative press towards the Tekken World Tour. If nothing is done about this blatant cheating, it will eliminate all integrity from the Tekken World Tour. An average person looking at this would know it's blatant cheating. Shadow should take the place as the person currently
Grave Digger chyba, coś takiego.
sitting at 21st place, which is something that we will talk about, and then you can review this event yourself. And then he attaches screenshots of the AI-like names, the amount of attendees being exactly 96, and then a ChatGPT generated response to creating a bunch of names for a Middle Eastern gaming tournament. I will overlay this on screen now because I know I'm going to be covering it up. But importantly, down here, Animal Nations by names that the AI came up with, Sand Viper and Desert Wolf.
Chodziło ci przez N, to nie.
Both participants in this tournament. Now, what I'm going to reiterate here when talking about this, when it comes to the fact that, quote, the fact that these dojos were approved at all shows either gross incompetence or intentional sweeping under the rug of the situation. An average person looking at this would know it's blatant cheating. What I'm going to bring up again is that there is clear proof from other tournaments that Rife has attended that there is no human oversight or verification of these dojos, and that's why this is able to happen. There is no humans that are looking at the brackets. There are no humans that are actually looking at this. It is all automated, and that explains why something like this could happen and why it's happened multiple times. And if we look at the .gg page for this Jeddah 4th dojo, you can see again exactly 96 attendees, and like he said, there are 0 DQs, and you can see that the amount of AI names here is ridiculous. Thunderpalm and Rage Crush, apparently this...
Irene, niby tak, ale... Co druga, cześć, napisałeś, gdybym wiedział, że mam dużą szansę pojechać, to sam bym sobie tego pilnował i pomagał w organizacji. Tylko, że to... No jest duża szansa, że wyjdzie prędzej czy później, nie? Ale z drugiej strony, co Bandai nam go zrobi?
Game went 2-1, which also indicates to me that there is also an attempt to hide this by making games here of players that clearly aren't real go 2-1 instead of 2-0 and just omitting the disqualification. Again, you have Steel Lion and Lightning Vortex, Shadow Drift Iron Wolf, Iron Palm, and Night Strike, again going 2-1 here. And it just goes on and on and on. And when you look at the attendees page as well, you're going to notice this too. You have...
Proszę ciebie, masz sklep Action. Takie banana chipsy. Bardzo spoko, chyba 4,39 kosztują za sztukę. A to jest 100 czy 150 gram.
Players like, maybe not here. Here we go. Shadow Fist, Desert Wolf, King Rage, Falcon Axe, Night Jin, Iron Palm, Sandstorm, Gym Mask. They're all just in a line. And when you look at the date that these accounts were created, November 2025, November 2025, November 2025, I'm just clicking on random ones, November 2025, and that's also an indicator that these are not real people. But again, because there's no human verification of the...
Wiecie, to jest data stworzenia konta?
And that's also an indicator that these are not...
A czy to nie jest tak, że dojo można było organizować do października? Nie, do któregoś tam listopada, dobra, bo to jest 4 listopada.
Not real people. But again, because there's no human verification of the dojo events, this is how the players are able to get away with this, even though when you look at this, these are very clearly not real people. Except for maybe Q8 Uwu, because who would come up with that? Anyway, besides Bandai Namco's incompetence, this
O, Mejsu, proszę, proszę. Smażysz ryż. Kurde, muszę w końcu zrobić kiedyś smażony ryż. Jeszcze nie robiłem, a kiedyś jak tam do Chińczyka chodziłem, to bardzo, bardzo lubiłem właśnie. Najczęściej brałem smażony ryż z warzywami albo z kurczakiem. Poszukam przepisu.
is the main allegation put out against Rife. And Black Panther makes a point that Shadow should be the one who is qualified for the Tekken World Tour Finals. But is there validity in that? Well, Rife right now is 12th on the leaderboard with 50.
Ej, wiecie co zróbcie? Niech da ktoś haradzie do podpisu papiery adopcyjne. I on zostanie waszym starym.
1,530 points. He is
A potem rzucicie go z wulkanu.
firmly on the leaderboard. It's not like he's at the bottom of the leaderboard and one little change would make him go down to 25th place or whatever. And also, it's important to say that we don't know if Rife was aware of this. If we look at another Jeddah Dojo event, like Jeddah Third Dojo, which was deemed points ineligible because it wasn't broadcast properly, and we look at this event, it has 107 entrants, and you're going to notice when looking at this that you have some players like Red Scorpion here, but at the same time, there is far less of these AI-generated names and far more real people. At least we can assume that they are real people.
Myślisz, że piąty
And so
sezon
because
będzie?
of that, there is not a consistent pattern with Jeddah Dojo doing this to such an extreme degree
Moim
that a
zdaniem
competitor would notice it. Yes,
trakcie
we have
trzeciego
players like
sezonu
Desert Wolf in here, and the Jin E,
no,
and
trzeci
there was
sezon
another one up here
zadecyduje
as
o
well,
tym, co
Stormbreaker.
będzie
But
z
again,
przyszłością
there is
Tekkena.
not half of these players that share this same naming convention, this same problem. And so because of that, it's reasonable to assume that Rife didn't know about this up until Jeddah Dojo 4. And then when Jeddah Dojo 4 happens, what does he do about it? You know, if we assume that Rife isn't knowledgeable or complicit in what has happened at this event, then what do you do about it if you are the player? Now, you can say that he should make a public statement, he should call them out, but that's not really fair to anyone. It's not fair to put
W ogóle mnie najbardziej rozwala jedna rzecz z RFM. To jest bardzo dobry gracz. To jest gość, który w zeszłym roku na finałach TWT zajął 3. miejsce. Wcześniej gdzieś tam chyba w 22 czy w 23 też był w top 8.
Rife in that position where he feels the need to make a public statement about this and bring down his own local scene, especially if there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. And then you can say, well, what is there going to be that you don't know about? And we don't know. There might not be anything. There might be a reason for this. It might be that these AI generated names are real people.
Wiesz co, części potrzebował. Gdyby nie miał w ogóle dojo, to byłby bardzo, bardzo daleko. No nie wszystkich, tak, ale
Don't have
części.
.gg accounts. We don't know. But it's not to defend this. This absolutely shouldn't happen, but there might be a reason for why Rife is doing this, and also putting him in that position just makes this worse. What I would do if I was in Rife's position is report it to Bandai Namco Esports directly. Don't make a public statement and let them make the final decision and let them investigate. And we don't know if Rife has done that. We don't know how knowledgeable he is. And if he is knowledgeable, we don't know if he has done anything about the situation. So we shouldn't necessarily just say this one event that he participated in just disqualifies him from it entirely because, again, we don't know what he's knowledgeable about. He shouldn't be punished for participating in an event that he didn't know was doing this. And he probably didn't know was going to do this before he showed up. So then the next question becomes, well, what about getting rid of the 150 points that he got from this dojo? And that is something that is completely fair to do.
Masz rację, masz rację.
Rife probably shouldn't have got 150 points for winning this dojo. This dojo should probably be stricken from the Tekken World Tour leaderboards entirely. But if Rife lost these 150 points and didn't take his second place highest point total, or his fifth highest point total, I should say, sorry, which is 100 points, then he would be down 150 points on the leaderboard, and that would put him to 1380. And just to give a little bit of context here, right now, Shadow's on the leaderboard with 1230, so that would not take him off of the Tekken World Tour leaderboard. However, another important point to point out here is that when one event is deemed as having broken the rules, as we saw in the MEA 3 region recently, all of the events that were organized by those admins are also deemed ineligible for points and stricken from the Tekken World Tour.
Tak, czyli w skrócie, gdyby RF przyznał Bandai Namco, czy napisałby na Twitterze, ej słuchajcie, te turnieje były organizowane tak i tak, zrezygnujcie z dodawania punktów, czy usuńcie punkty, no to wtedy w podobnie jak w przypadku Iraku, nie Iranu, Iraku, tutaj Bandai Namco mogłoby powiedzieć, słuchajcie, oni dostają bana na TWT i usuwamy wszystkie punkty z tych turniejów.
Leaderboards. And so all 4 Jeddah dojos here would also be in violation of that, which means he wouldn't get points for this one, number 2, which is here, and then number 1, which is here. Now, of these, one of them was already deemed ineligible for points, so it doesn't matter. And one of them is Rai's 5th placement on the Tekken World Tour leaderboard. And so that means these two dojos specifically would bring him down 300 points if they were completely stricken. And again, if we don't consider his 6th and 7th place dojo placements, he would be down 300 points, which would bring him down to 1,230 points, which is tied with Shadow in 21st place. But if we include his 6th and 7th placements, it is going to be this one, which gives him 10 points, and it's going to be wherever this other dojo is, this one that gave him 50 points. He has no other dojos he's participating in. These are the only two that would give him 60 points, which means he would be 60 points up on the leaderboard. So even if you take out all of the Jeddah dojos from the Tekken World Tour, Rife is still in the top 20, and Shadow is still in 21st place. The main thing this would affect is Rife's seeding in the Tekken World Tour finals. And yeah, that should happen. His seeding should be affected, but it wouldn't make Shadow the one of the qualifying players for the Tekken World Tour. However, there is one other thing that does, and that are these events. The events that were labeled incorrectly by Bandai Namco Esports because of their automated review. To recap, if we look at this event, Saudi E-League Fighting, this leads us to a hub.
No dobra, myślę, że wszystko już tutaj wiemy w tej części. Przejdźmy do kolejnej. On będzie po prostu mówił teraz, że jeśli tych nie liczyć, no to wtedy coś tam, wtedy ma mniej punktów, powinien spaść, Shadow powinien skoczyć na miejsce RF-a. W ogóle śmiesznie, bo Shadow z RF-em w jednym turnieju grali w finale w tym sezonie. To ciekawostka. Dobra. Przejdźmy tutaj.
200 of these points shouldn't be here. And that's not his fault. It's not his fault that Bandai Namco mislabeled the dojo. But at the end of the day, that's how it is. And this is just more proof that there needs to be more investigative work, more scrutiny from Bandai Namco Esports themselves, because this kind of discrepancy is ridiculous for a competitive setting like this and really makes you question the entire competitive integrity of the system at all. And next we go to Alidar. And Alidar has been in the spotlight for the cheating allegations for months and months and months now, and it is really starting to get traction with the wider Tekken community. And a lot of players in Oceania have done a lot of reporting and investigation into this because of how much it affects them. And because they are in the middle of this, and because they have all been affected by this alleged cheating, I'm going to read off what they say and use their words in order to convey what the problem is in Guam. And we're going to start with Necromancer's series of tweets because he has done a lot of the investigative work into Alidar. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm going to read what is important to point out about this. Evidence suggests that Alidar may be benefiting from irregular tournament reporting hosted by Guam Esports Federation, which creates unfair advantages on the regional leaderboard. Unfortunately, members of the community have previously raised these concerns with Bandai Namco, but with no clear resolution yet, this approach feels like the best way for the community's voice to be heard. Although I want to be clear, if there's verifiable evidence that disproves any of this, I genuinely welcome correction. Guam Esports Federation on Instagram appears to be hosting numerous tournaments throughout the past 2 years to support Alidar's run for first place on the Oceania leaderboard. In 2024...
To nie wiem, czy kojarzycie, ja wrzucałem w którymś fighterkowie chyba informacje o tym i też było widać, jak wygląda tło, czy to miejsce, gdzie oni grali, ale pewnie on tutaj jeszcze pokaże.
Alidar placed first on the leaderboard, allowing him to be flown overseas to participate in the last chance qualifier. This year, he plans to do the same. Yet almost all of his report tournaments display an unusually high number of disqualifications. Often 15 or more players are recorded as DQs. In the latest Dojo GESF Summer Fall Showdown, September 2025, there were a total of 20 individual DQs, with 4 of these players DQing in winners and then continuing to play in losers, with screenshots attached. An even worse case of this, from the Dojo day, the 30th of August on his profile, I counted a total of 52 people DQ'd and at least 1 on winners and losers. I triple checked these numbers, though my human error is still possible. Either way, you can see in the screenshots, they DQ in winners, they go down the losers, and then here, again, DQ in winners, go down the losers, and this is a very common theme that you're going to see from the dojos that are put into question throughout this video and throughout the documentation that I have provided. There are also several instances where players are recorded as losing 0-2 on the winner's side, only to be disqualified immediately in the loser's bracket. Same pattern occurs where there are DQs on the winner's side and then 2-0 on losers. This creates an appearance of artificially inflating the total number of entrants and match results, making the event appear larger and more active than it actually is. Screenshot attached from here, and we will be looking at that. This type of reporting is present throughout all of Alidar's dojos beginning from 2024, making this extremely concerning for the honesty of his dojos.
Jedna rzecz. Ja tylko się upewnię, ale on chyba w zeszłym roku tak samo się dostał. No. A w 23 nie było. Dojo wprowadzili w zeszłym roku.
and the regional leaderboard. I've only provided screenshots from dojos mentioned above, as I would spend excessive amounts of time recording this pattern from every tournament on his profile since the start of 2024. Furthermore, AliDaw is also the tournament organizer of every dojo listed on his Tekken Mode 2 profile, while simultaneously being the #1 seed player in all of them. Now, this is where I'm going to come in. AliDaw is not the tournament organizer for every one of his dojo events that is on his Tekken Mode 2 profile. There are multiple events that AliDaw has placed in, multiple dojos that he is not an admin of. That said, he is an admin of a significant number of these events, but he is not an admin for all of them. However, the point here that Necromancer makes.
W ogóle opcja taka. Gdybym ja był takim alidarem, gdybym ja był takim człowiekiem, który chce oszukać i ja chcę sobie te wyniki wpisywać, to co stoi na przeszkodzie, żeby założyć drugie konto? Po prostu fejkowe konto, a nie swoim kontem adminować turniej. No, puknijcie się, ludzie.
Is still very valid. This is a major conflict of interest as it allows him to influence tournament logistics, player placements, as well as reporting outcomes, which is 100% accurate. Having such control over both administration and participation raises concerns about the transparency, fairness, and overall credibility of his dojos. These repeated patterns suggest that many of these tournaments may not reflect genuine participation or fair competition. When over a half or a third of entrants are disqualified, with some even appearing in both winners and losers brackets, it raises serious doubts about the validity of the reported results and the legitimacy of the points awarded. Despite this, Bandai Namco still counts these DQs as full point brackets on the Tekken Mode 2 leaderboard, which severely inflates the point distribution system. And moving on from this, there's more things I said, and I can't scroll down because there are Discord screenshots, and there have been reports of videos being taken down for showing these Discord screenshots for
Co? Usuwali filmy przez to, że pokazywali screen z
breaking
Discorda?
privacy, so I don't want to show anymore, and that's also
Okay.
why I'm blurring one of the images on here as well, because I don't want to risk anything happening to this video. I'm purely trying to show things that are out in the public, mainly .gg pages, to avoid any potential DMCA takedowns because of the nature of this video. But Necromancer makes the point quite clear in this case. There's a significant amount of DQs in these tournaments that seem to be getting misreported. And if you look at this tournament here, the GESF Summer Fall Showdown, that is linked from Necromancer, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DQs in winners, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 DQs in losers. You also see some of these DQs in losers, like Heidi HO being listed as 0-2 in winners and then DQing in losers. So it's not even a continuation of plays that DQ'd in winners, also disqualifying in losers. It is a mix of partial disqualifications in both the winners.
To nie musi być problem, tak po prostu mogło być.
And the losers bracket, which is obviously a big problem.
Tragina.
Sorry, I miscounted. There's also a couple more that are in losers round 3 and round 4 as well. Now, again, when it comes to an individual tournament like this, there is reason to believe that, you know, the disqualification reporting may be accurate and it's just happenstance that ends up being this way. It is a significant amount of DQs, yes, but at the same time, it could just be that the way that they run the tournament or something that's going on with the tournament causes this kind of thing to happen. And you can see as well, the DQs are all over the place. That's very difficult to properly count them and review with this being 104 entrants.
Wiecie co, ja na chwilkę odejdę, puszczę tutaj reklamę i zaraz wracam, dosłownie 2 minutki. O, czekajcie. Kanał wspiera Turtle Beach, producent sprzętu i akcesoriów dla graczy, w tym kontrolerów marki Victrix. Z kodem JakubDi otrzymasz 10% zniżki, a w opisie tego filmu znajdziesz polecane przeze mnie kontrolery do gier. Dobra, jestem. Lecimy dalej.
What the actual size of this tournament is. If you look on AliDaw's.gg page, you can see that these are labeled as 64-player dojos. Does this fall below 64 players with the amount of DQs? It's way too much to count, right? But we'll talk more about these brackets and the DQs later. For now, let's go to the next series of tweets, which is Bobby. Now, Bobby is the #2 player on the Oceania leaderboards. And what Bobby's tweets sort of highlight is not only reiterating some of this evidence, but also to show how if there is false reporting, there are victims in what's happening with this. This isn't just a silly little esports tournament that, you know, is having a little bit of like cheating here and there, a little bit of oopsie whoopsies. There are people that suffer because of what's happening. And I'm going to read out Bobby's series of tweets because I feel that they are very important to highlight.
To jest w ogóle masakra. 46 DQ z 110 uczestników. To oni po prostu powinni przed turniejem ich pousuwać, jeśli wiadomo było, że kogoś nie będzie.
Now that's the end of the Tekken World Tour regional season. I'm posting with great concern to the legitimacy of the Oceanic Tekken World Tour rankings. Necromancer has already posted with great evidence. The player Alidot is benefiting from inflated dojos and boosted numbers at his dojos. After looking at each dojo that has awarded Alidot points, I found that the events often have semi-DQs and a massive amount of full DQs. However, they have carefully ensured they never drop below the 64-player and 48-player events, so Alidot is able to get as many points as possible. These 48 and 64-player events are very important for Guam, as those numbers are not easily reached in Australia. In October, the bracket of 110 entrants had a total of
Czekajcie. Populacja 167 000. Zapisało się 110 osób. To znaczy, że 0,7 promila mniej więcej, tak? W Polsce mamy ludzi 20 kilka razy tyle. To by znaczyło, żebyśmy mieli zapisane 2000 uczestników.
46 disqualifications, leaving the total players at exactly 64 players. The bracket in November had a total of 40 players and 8 DQs, leaving the players at exactly 32. September is one of the most drastic cases, as
W teorii, tak sobie myślę, Bandai Namco mogłoby, mając dane z tych turniejów, robić jakieś takie podsumki właśnie typu, o, tu jest takie odchylenie, że tyle procent, tylu jest uczestników przy takiej populacji i wtedy jakoś to badać. To nie sprawiłoby, że problem zostałby wyeliminowany, natomiast łatwiej byłoby to namierzyć i ludzie musieli wymyślić inny sposób na oszustwo.
this bracket has 70 entrants with 20 partial DQs and 8 full DQs. Of these partial DQs, many of the players lose 0-2 and winners or losers, as one
W ogóle co to jest X-Cancel? Jakaś strona korzystająca z Twittera,
of the
przez
game,
X,
one of
przepraszam.
these players being Insanity, the president of the Guam Esports Federation, who runs many of these dojos. Another case of a 64-man event is August Dojo with 104 attendees and a total of 52 partial DQs and 18 full DQs, meaning half of these players at this event were DQ'd. That is the event that Necromancer showed here with 104 players, so Bobby has done the work for us. Thank you, Bobby. Very frequently after players disqualified, the person who won by disqualification will win or lose 2-0, also questioning the validity of that player's attendance being legitimate. I post this as it is my dream to attend the Tekken World Tour Finals and to represent the scene that I love. I have worked unbelievably hard this year to travel interstate 8 times to go to dojos around Australia in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, as my own city of Adelaide cannot even reach a 16-plus man dojo. I've caught a total of 16 flights and spent upwards of $6,000. Let me reiterate this, an upwards of $6,000.
To są dolary australijskie, one są teraz mniej więcej po 2,5, no ale wciąż to jest dużo.
Travel and compete for this regional spot. The scene, Australian scene, has rallied together to put together legitimate dojos in order to stand a chance versus the Guam community, as we weren't able to travel to Guam to compete in dojos. Here's an example of what it would look like to just get to one Guam dojo. And you can see that, yes, prices can be as low as 640 Australian, but this round trip that is 2,500 Australian is 54 hours long. These other ones...
On pokazuje przykładowe. 54 godziny.
As well that are more expensive are
Co?
22, 23 hours long. And the reason for this is because you aren't going to have direct connecting flights to Guam because, well, no one flies to Guam. Guam is a very remote island in the middle of the ocean. So in order to be able to travel to Guam, not only do you have to incur this extreme expense, but it's also a very, very long flight because you have to make a bunch of connecting flights to eventually get you to Guam. And then that same problem is going to be coming back as well. So
Pokażę wam tylko. Nie, to czekajcie, link się nie skopiował. Gdzie jest Guam? Japonia, Australia, Papua Nowa Gwinea i Guam. To w sumie wygląda jak skarpetka. A może jeszcze tutaj by robili te turnieje, no. W takim miejscu dojo na 100 osób. Ej, jak weźmiemy teraz, czekajcie. Może zrobimy sobie przejażdżkę po Guam. Dobra, lecimy z filmem.
When you're flying this much and spending this much money and this much time to go to one dojo for one day in Guam, it is simply not worth it and it's inattainable. And this really highlights one of the problems with the dojo scene in general is how regions are divided. The regional system does not work. And this is one extreme example of many different examples of how this regional system
Właśnie, w
doesn't work.
piwnicy
The
sobie
dojo
robią.
system is supposed to highlight the best player in one of the 15
Robią
regions and
turnieje
send them to represent their region at the
ktoś
Tekken
leci
World
na
Tour Finals.
finały
But
TWT.
very frequently, players within their region cannot go to other regions to participate in those regions' dojos or play with those other players within their own region because of financial gatekeeping. This is because of how broad the regions are. They are simply not set up in a logical way to allow players to be able to travel and compete with each other. And that also means if you have an isolated poverty region, like Guam, for instance, that they are more easily able to manipulate their own dojos and boost one individual player because it's impossible for other players in the region to be able to go to that dojo and compete with those players or play in these, quote, rigged dojos. I can tell you from my own personal experience living in the America 1 region, America 1 encompasses the entirety of the United States and Canada, including Alaska and Hawaii. This means that if someone lives in Hawaii, it's impossible for them to be able to play in the Tekken World Tour. Even if you have the single best player, if you have an AI bot that lives in Hawaii, they will never be able to qualify for the Tekken World Tour Finals because of how financially unsustainable it is.
To prawda.
That is a ridiculous flaw with the entire Tekken World Tour system.
Oni, gdyby zrobili same finały regionalne, wiadomo, że Bandai Namco musiałaby za to zapłacić. Ale przynajmniej byłoby to bardziej sprawiedliwe.
If you, again, I want to reiterate, if you have someone who lives in Hawaii and they are an AI bot that will always 2-0 every single person they play against, they are tasked, they will not qualify for the Tekken World Tour Finals. And it's simply because of the financial cost of being able to attend events within their own region. At the same time, if you flip this on its head, if you have Hawaii, who's constantly hosting 96-player dojos, the only person that can qualify for the Tekken World Tour Finals is someone in Hawaii because no one from the United States or Canada is going to be able to go to those events. No one. It would be impossible. And that's sort of what's happening here with Guam. And I can tell you from my own anecdotal experience as someone who lives in Michigan in the United States, it is impossible for me to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour regional system, not because of my own individual skill, but simply because of the financial cost of it. It would be cheaper for me to try competing in the global leaderboard, going to EVOs and trying to win EVO than it would be to try to participate in the regional dojo system. And I think this from Bobby really illustrates and highlights the core problem and why cheating is so prolific, is so effective, is because of how the regional system is set up. And then we move to Yagami. And Yagami here has posted more evidence of what has been talked about. And what Yagami says here is Guam has been intentionally marking players with partial DQs to inflate their dojos, allowing Alidar to gain more points. The July Guam dojo was marked as a 48-plus dojo. However, if all DQs were properly counted, it would only be a 32-plus dojo. The August Guam dojo was marked as a 64-player dojo. However, once again, the partial DQs, it would be a 48. But then the real damning piece of evidence that Yagami provides here is this player, Uzi Wuzi. There's clear evidence that these partial DQs were done with ill intent to boost numbers. Here, a player from New Zealand was marked as a partial DQ, despite being physically impossible for him to attend the tournament because he was playing ranked.
Dobra, ale nie mógł grać w hotelu?
June 8th, when this tournament took place the following day, and like we showed with Bobby, a flight from New Zealand to Guam takes around 20.
No, jakby się uprzeć, to mógł grać w hotelu, nie?
2 hours. Yeah, Uzi Wuzi was marked as going 0-2, and then later what Yagami doesn't show is he was then marked as a disqualification. Here, you can see the bracket for this tournament. You can see here at the top, Uzi Wuzi going 0-2, and then if we go down...
Albo na Steam Decku, ale...
Uzi was marked as going 0-2, and then later what Yagami doesn't show to, like we ranked...
Na jakiej platformie? A, to nie jest oznaczone.
On June, Uzi Wuzi. Here, you can see the bracket for this tournament. You can see here at the top, Uzi Wuzi going 0-2. And then if we go down, Uzi Wuzi was then later marked as a DQ, which is that same problem that we see in the other bracket.
Powinna być możliwość... To nie chodzi o ten konkretny przypadek, raczej w drugą stronę. Jeśli ktoś jest z wygranych, to powinno być takie ustawienie na strategy, że od razu zaznacza DQ w przegranych i TWT powinno tego wymagać. Byłoby łatwiej.
You also see how there are 2 DQs here in winners, and then we go...
Albo jeszcze jeden pomysł. Jeśli ktoś ma 0 punktów, to wtedy wyskakuje takie okienko z informacją, chociaż nie, tego byłoby za dużo, kurczę. Na pewno, czy nie powinno być DQ? Nie, tego byłoby za dużo.
Go down to losers, and there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2 full DQs, 4 partial DQs. And in this case, if you count both of them simultaneously, it would bring the entrance to 34. But regardless of that, there is proof that this player was not at this tournament at all. And more proof to sort of allude to the fact that these DQs weren't reported correctly is you look at the amount of 0-2s. And again, this is going to be a key piece of evidence in most of these events, but you look at the amount of 0-2s here between winners round 1 and 2, there is a single game that goes 1 and 2. When you get to winners round 3, there's only one more. And that is highly unusual. And when you look in losers, again, you have one single game in losers round 2 that goes 1 and 2, and then you have 3 in round 3 that go 1 and 2. It's very unusual behavior for this to happen. This either means that seeding is inaccurate, meaning that this is just a very uncompetitive environment, or there are a lot of players here that should have been listed as DQs that weren't. And so what's a possible explanation for this? Because unlike with Rife's tournaments,
Latte Esports.
these do seem to be
Ma platformę PlayStation. O,
real
właśnie.
players. How are you having
Dzięki
such
za
a large
sprawdzenie.
amount of DQs at your tournaments consistently, like what's happening in Guam? And I believe I have an answer. And that falls to this.
Powinni przestać polegać na first party stronach do zarządzania swoimi turniami. Co do zasady tak, byłoby fajnie, ale kasa. Musieliby
Funny
to
little
za to
button right here,
zapłacić.
Smash Ultimate Singles. Because you see, the Guam Esports Federation, the Guam FGC, doesn't just have Tekken as a game that they play, they also very consistently have Smash. And if you look at the Smash bracket, you can see that there are quite a few players who are playing in Smash. And some of these players in the Smash bracket are also in the Tekken bracket.
Czy mają Smash World Tour?
I want you to look at Zoro, for instance, up here. If we look at the Tekken bracket, Zoro is listed here as going 2-0, and then 0-2, and then we go down the losers, and he's listed as going 0-2. That same sort of pattern we see with, like, Woozy Woozy, for example. And so if we look at Zoro's profile, something you're going to notice that's very interesting is that this person is a Smash player. If you look at his details, he says he's a Smash Ultimate player for Guam. A Smash player. If you look at his details,
PR, okej. Nie wiem, co to znaczy. Myślałem, że jest PR-owcem dla jakiegoś zespołu.
And if you look at his profile, you'll notice that he plays Smash, 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 Smash.
Wygrywa wszystko. To jest taki A-lider Smasha.
But he also plays Tekken 8. And almost every single time he plays in Tekken 8, he goes
1, 2.
0-2. You look at this one Recon 2025.
A nie, 0-2. A, bo 33, 49, dobrze.
Here, Tekken 8, Tekken World Tour Dojo. He goes 0-2, and then he's listed as going 1-2 in his next game. He has a win here, which was 2-0, and this player also win.
Dobra, ten gość nie ma życia, że tyle tego analizował. Ale na to patrzył.
0-2 later. And this player that he went 2-0 against, Heidi, was then in losers listed as a DQ, which means that Zero didn't even actually win this game. This player allegedly was just not present at the tournament, and they marked them as a partial DQ. So that 2-0 and the scores may not even be real. Here's another one from July 25th. The Guam Esports Federation Summer Fall Show, and that had all of those DQs. Again, he's listed as going 0-2. He's listed as going 0-2 in pretty much every single one of these tournaments. Here's another one from June 6th, 0-2, 0-2, 2-0. And if you look at this player's profile, again, win through DQ and then 0-2. And another interesting thing about this as well is this is going back all the way to last year with Season 1 of the Tekken World Tour, and again, 0-2, 0-2. But the real damning piece of evidence is the Summer Fall Series in September, where he is listed as a DQ. And so this is evidence that alludes to the fact that all of these other games with Zoro, where he's listed as 0-2, were actually disqualifications, and he's never participated in Tekken despite...
Nie. To znaczy, mam tę czapeczkę z Ace Attorney nie bez powodu. To, że raz coś takiego się zdarzyło, nie jest dowodem na to, że tak jest zawsze.
Signing up for it.
To jest jakaś
Another
przesłanka,
interesting thing as well
ale nie dowód.
is that the first time in Zoro's entire .gg profile where he is listed as playing Tekken 8, May 4th, 2024, which is the first Tekken World Tour Dojo
Aczkolwiek przypadek 32 graczy.
event in Guam, he is listed as going 0-2 in this tournament as well. And if you look through the rest of Zoro's.gg page, you'll notice that there is not a single instance beforehand where he plays in Tekken. He plays Smash, he plays Street Fighter 6, but he does not play Tekken 7 at all. And this isn't just this one player as well. There's another one, K3D here, who is a Smash player. He plays in Smash.
Mógł się rejestrować na całe evenie na wydarzeniu. Są limity, ale o jakich limitach mówisz, przepraszam, bo nie ogarniam.
But he also has a couple of times where he has played Tekken, and he is also going 0-2 in these as well. And another thing as well, if you go to May 4th, 2024, you're going to notice this is the first.
Nie ma limitu. Mógł się zarejestrować, po prostu nie startować, tak, ale jeśli nie startujesz, to masz DQ, ale ja miałem taką sytuację na swoim pierwszym wyjazdowym turnieju. Pojechałem na Soul Calibur, ale nie miałem co robić, to zapisałem się na Tekkena 4 i potem ktoś po turnieju pisał, że dlaczego ludzie się zapisują w sytuacji, kiedy potrafią grać w grę, bo ja wtedy nic nie potrafiłem w tego Tekkena, no ale grałem.
Tekken 8 tournament he's played in, and he DQ'd. And if you look before that, he never played in Tekken. This is the first time, and he went 0-2, 2-0, and then DQ'd, which again indicates that his placements in Tekken, he was never actually playing the game.
Co?
And so this is where
Tu chyba już niewiele powie o tym Alidarze.
I suspect is allegedly getting these players to inflate their dojo numbers in order to get a higher place on the dojo tier, and why there's so many players that are DQing, because they are all Smash players that aren't actually playing Tekken. They are only there, how the Tekken World Tour works, so what's going on, the TOs are probably just asking them to do it, and they have no idea what's happening. So while all of this information is, of course, alleged, right, we don't know exactly what's happening, the Oceania players have been very outspoken about this for a long time. And if this is going on, it's been going on since the beginning of the Tekken World Tour Dojo. They have had a plan to do this before the Tekken World Tour even started in Season 1. And because of the harm that has been caused to...
Jedną śmieszną rzecz wam powiem. Jak byłem kiedyś 60, jak było TWT online, to było 2019 chyba, albo 20 może przy koronie. Był region, albo Evo, Europa Wschodnia, Zachodnia, no i zapisujecie się na to niezależnie od tego, z jakiego regionu jesteście. Ja sobie porównywałem te drabinki i zauważyłem, że był jakiś Hiszpan, coś tam banana, Smiley banana, Happy banana, nie pamiętam. Nie Heja banana, nie mylić z Polakiem grającym Mortal Kombat. I on się zapisał na oba turnieje, bo najpierw go zobaczyłem on jest z Hiszpanii, więc powinien się zapisać na turniej Europe West, ale był w naszym regionie, a potem okazało się, że zapisał się na oba. No i zrobiłem szpagat.
Players in the Oceania region, if this is the case, if this has happened, there needs to be a statement from Bandai Namco. Of all of the things that are going to be talked about throughout this video and throughout the documentation, this is the single most important thing for Bandai Namco to address, because there's so many eyes on it, there's so much attention, and there's been evidence that's been presented. Bandai Namco should make a statement to the players. It's important to preserve the competitive integrity of the Tekken World Tour, and part of preserving that competitive integrity is being transparent with what you're doing to enforce the rules of the tour. Maybe Bandai Namco investigates this and finds no wrongdoing. That is possible. But if they do that, they need to tell players about this, because there's so much that's been presented and players are so disgruntled by what's happening that if they don't, then regardless of what's happening in actuality, it calls into question the entirety of the Tekken World Tour as a whole. The next region we're going to be shifting our focus to is the Europe 2 region. And the
Kostakis.
number one player in the Europe 2 region is Kastakis. Apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. And this player, the main tournaments that they've played in are Lock Dojo. And Lock Dojo has a similar problem as Guam, where they have DQs that go down to exactly 64 players, which indicates misreporting DQs and dojo point inflation. So if
no okej, on tu już siedzi, ja nie wiem, czy on to nagrywał z przerwami, ale on tu już 1,5 godziny gada.
we look at a couple of these just as an example, we have this one, Lock Dojo number 25 with 71 entrants. And if we look at the brackets, the DQs, we can see 1, 2, 3 DQs in this one, a whole bunch in losers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which gives us 5 partial DQs. And then we have an additional 2 here. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is another 5 partial DQs. So the total amount of DQs that we have is 6 for this 71 person event, which brings the total amount of participants down to 65. But then obviously, if we count the partial DQs, I don't need to do the math for you. This would bring this well below the 64 player threshold.
No Nie, bo ci DQ z góry i z dołu mogą się pokrywać. To matematyka nie tak działa, proszę pana.
And another thing to point out as well is to look at the 0-2s in winners round 1 and round 2. There is a single game between winners round 1, 2, and 3 that go 1 and 2. And then if you look in losers, it's a similar story, except this goes with 0 games that go 1 and 2 up until losers round 5, which is another indicator that a lot of these players that are playing aren't actually here and should have been
A to jest poziom top 12.
listed as DQs. When we look at Lock Dojo number 24,
Sharp, nie wiem czy wiesz, ale tu będzie jeszcze Yomi Cross Retrosfera.
again, it's a similar story. It has 74 entrants in the bracket, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs up in winners, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs in losers. So there's 2 partial DQs. And then in this pool, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DQs in winners and 5 DQs in losers. So there is a total of 8 DQs with 2 partial DQs. And if you combine those together, that's 10 total DQs, which would bring the number down to exactly 64.
Siema, siema. A w ogóle jedna rzecz, Ponki, bo on jest nakręcony. Nie wiem, czy widziałeś. Ja to oglądam na przyspieszeniu 1.4. Więc może się tak dodatkowo wydawać, że jest nakręcony przez prędkość.
Dojo number 23. Again, it's the same thing. We have 70 entrants for this tournament, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs up in winners and a whole bunch in losers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in losers. So it's 5 partial DQs, and then we have another 3 full DQs and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Turnieje Dojo mają nie mieć sensu. Wiesz co, w skrócie oglądamy film o tym, jak pewne wyniki są podejrzane. I są gracze, którzy... Jest na przykład gość z Guam, które ma mieszkańców 167 000, a były tam turnieje organizowane, gdzie zapisało się 110 osób, DQ było około 50. Tu akurat tego nie pokazał, ale oni grali dosłownie w takim małym pomieszczeniu w galerii handlowej. No to nie ma opcji, żeby to był turniej taki duży. No i Guam jest takie. W ogóle gdzie ono się znajduje. Więc TLDR chodzi o to, że po prostu ludzie oszukują i nie ma w tym momencie gotowego systemu, żeby temu przeciwdziałać. Plus osoby, które sprawdzają te dojo, nie sprawdzają ich dokładnie. To nie jest dobrze przygotowane. Polecam ci w razie czego potem przewinąć, zwłaszcza na fragment dotyczący początek, tam nie wiem, to będzie pewnie około 20, może 30 minuty o RF-ie, gdzie pokazują, że w ogóle oni zrobili taką ligę w ramach jednego wydarzenia na StarGG i potem w 3 różnych miejscach masz różną liczbę graczy w danym turnieju. Tu masz 78, tu masz 80 kilka, a tu masz 100 ileś, bo StarGG jakoś nie ogarnia tych liczb.
6, 7, 8. So 5 partial DQ, so 6 full, 10 partial, which is ridiculous. And
dobra, jak mówisz, że wygląda legit, to ja ci, drogi Sharpie, założę okulary. O, proszę, mam nadzieję, że to pomoże.
again, that brings the number down to 65 disqualifications.
Być
No,
może.
sorry, this was 4 DQs. Sorry, so it was 7 full DQs in total, which brings this down to exactly 64 players. And with the partial DQs, obviously it would go below the 64 player status. And so here's Lock Dojo number 22 as well. This had 82 entrants, and you can see with the DQs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we have 7 also in losers. And then here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here as well, and 1, 2, 3.
Taka podpowiedź Ctrl F, DQ i patrzymy ile jest. Byłoby szybciej.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. 8, sorry, I miscounted. There's 8 here and then 8 here. So that makes for a total of 15 disqualifications, which brings the number of entrants for this tournament down to 67. And because these are all full DQs as well, it really makes you wonder why the DQs in these dojos are so... There are so many partials and not full DQs as well, when it would bring them down the 64 player number. And you can also see with this tournament as well, in comparison to the other ones, look how many games go 1 and 2. You have one here, 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 and losers, you have one here. You have one here, have here, here. So this is a lot more of like a reasonable dojo, but this is also very early on in the Tekken World Tour season, and as we get further along, the more and more egregious that they get. The problem with Lock Dojo is that when it happens once, it could be a coincidence, but when it happens this many times, over the course of multiple tournaments, over the course of multiple months, it becomes a pattern. And that...
Ciekawy jestem, czy... Właśnie, przecież w zeszłym sezonie Frizenik coś tam jeszcze nie pojechał do Grecji na jakiś turniej? Jak to wyglądało?
That pattern is something that we see from other dojos, other tournaments that are engaging in not reporting DQs.
Siema, siema. To jest nick, który ja kojarzę ze Street Fightera, dobrze pamiętam?
Now, the interesting thing about Lock Dojo is that Lock Dojo is an acronym. L-O-K. And if you go to the homepage for Lock Dojo, these tournaments are hosted by Legacy.
Swoją drogą, poszukajcie sobie na YouTubie. Nie chcę pokazywać, bo jeszcze nie wiem, zbanują czy coś. Jak wygląda kanał Legacy of Kaiser? Siema, siemano? Tak, jak coś trochę jest pamięć. Zobaczcie, jak wygląda kanał Legacy of Kaiser na YouTubie, a potem połączcie to z faktem, że właściciel tego kanału zaaplikował na stanowisko e-sports managera w organizacji z Riyadu, czyli w arabskiej. Połączcie te fakty i ciekawe, co wam wyjdzie.
Of Kaiser. And so, in my mind, this feels like a gross betrayal of trust. Because this person is known in the fighting game community. He obviously puts together these events that have a bunch of other tournaments in them. And so his tournaments engaging in this behavior feels gross. And this isn't to say that Legacy of Kaiser is the mastermind. He's the one doing this. This is a multi-game tournament. He is the sole admin of the tournament. He's not going to be overseeing everything. They're going to be bracket organizers for that, I'm sure, who are reporting.
W ogóle to jest gość, który też prowadził, był liderem na EVO, jeśli chodzi o sędziów, turnieju Fatal Fury City of the Wolves.
The DQs.
Można powiedzieć, że łysy z Grecji.
I'm not saying that he is the person that is doing this. But what I am saying is that as the admin and organizer of an event, of a tournament, you are the one that is responsible for ensuring fair play and the competitive nature of your tournament. If there are things like this that are going on that needs to be investigated by the person that makes and organizes the tournament. And by not doing that, they are part of the being complicit in not just the tournament itself's competitive integrity, but also the competitive integrity of the Tekken World Tour as a whole. So even though he might not be the one that is
Łysy z Grecja
causing this to happen with the bracket, there is still that very clear pattern and that problem of not reporting DQs at his tournament. And that's something that he, as the organizer, has the responsibility to look into. In my personal opinion, looking at these dojos, I do not think that he has done that. And with him being such a prominent figure, I think that just makes the situation even worse. But it's not just Lock Dojo.
Czekajcie. A czy on jakoś się do tego odniósł? Jestem ciekawy. Retweetuję. Wiem o co chodzi. Tasos. Nie, on tylko... O, właśnie to jest to. Mówiłem, eSports Nations Cup National Team Manager Application. No i połączcie to z jego kanałem na YouTubie.
That Kawasaki's has participated in. There is also this dojo, BattleNet SKG Dojo number 1, a 32-player dojo. And if you look at the brackets, this is also taking place in Greece. It has 45 entrants, and I actually zoom out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 disqualifications, bringing the number down to 34.
Ale nie zwrócił uwagi tutaj na to, że ten ace tutaj dopiero dostał DQ.
Now, one of these DQs was partial. So 10 full DQs, 1 partial DQ. So if you exclude the partial DQ, it brings it down to 35 players instead. But the point still stands. Because of the other problems with these tournaments, and because Legacy of Kaiser participating in this tournament, this dojo also comes into question just as a product of circumstance. And then we also have the last one.
Właśnie, mogliby wprowadzić zapis taki, że admin nie może startować w turnieju. Tak na zasadzie, że po prostu gdzieś tam zaszyte na StarGG. Jakiś checkbox i cyk. Ale to dużo powiedziane. Tylko chcielibyśmy. No i teraz Polska górą, słuchajcie. Yomi mentioned.
Yomi X Retro Surfer Volume 7. This tournament actually took place in Poland, not in Greece. And this was labeled as a 64-player event, and it has 65 entrants. And notably, this tournament has 0 DQs. It has one partial DQ, but again, that's not a full DQ, and then they go 0-2 in losers.
O, czy Simek był na tym turnieju? Ktoś kojarzy?
So this really brings into question the entirety of the Europe 2 region as a whole. This isn't just about like one player playing at one tournament series. We see this pattern with a lot of tournaments in this region, whether it's in Greece or in Poland. And I can tell you that
Ja myślałem, że DQ było...
I had someone talk to me who is in Greece and has gone to Lock Dojo, that the tournament reporting and the DQ reporting is accurate, according to this player. But the problem is that they suspect that tournaments in Poland are rigging the brackets to inflate their numbers. And when you look at this tournament,
Absolutnie nie, gościu.
and you look at it being 65 entrants, 0 DQs, and you like look at not that bracket, this bracket with the 0-2s. I mean, mostly it does look fairly normal. I mean, you have like a 1-2 here. I mean, the rest of this is like whatever.
Gdzieś byłeś na streamie.
But you look here and you see like you have 3 1-2s here, you have a 1-2 here, you have a 1-2 here. Like this looks fairly normal. But having the one partial DQ to bring it down to 64 and then nothing else reported, when you have like this bracket, for example, or even this.
Właśnie ja nie siedziałem na scenie za bardzo do czasu Tekkena 7, więc nie wiem jak to wyglądało. Ale też za czasu Tekkena 7 nie było Dojo, więc to nie było aż takie istotne.
1-2 is like, it's really difficult to look at this, especially when you look at the circumstances around everything else and not call it at least a little bit into question. But then the other problem from this is even regardless of that, there might be a case where you have bracket organizers that are organizing the Tekken 8 bracket, assuming that there is foul play, who are doing this at Lock Dojo because they suspect that there's cheating in Poland. And we just looked at the Oceania region, and we looked at Oceania as being a place that believes that if there is cheating, then we have to report to Bandai Namco, do something about do it the legitimate way. But if Bandai Namco isn't going to do anything, then the only way for your community to be able to compete within the region in the Tekken World Tour leaderboard if someone else is cheating is to cheat yourself.
Tak.
The only two ways you
Jak
have to be able to
cheatera.
actually compete in the Tekken World Tour in your region, if somewhere else is cheating that is not financially available to you, and going from Greece to Poland is obviously a huge financial trek. It's just not going to be able to happen. I mean, you have to go all the way through the Baltics region in order to be able to get there, because Greece is at the bottom part of Europe. You have to go all the way to Poland. It's just not going to realistically be able to happen.
Dobra, typ nie zdaje sobie z tego sprawy, że my i tak nie będziemy mieli takich liczb na turniejach.
So the only two options you have is to document, report to Bandai Namco, and hope that they do something before the Tekken World Tour Finals, which...
Wyobraźcie sobie, że ktoś strzela szpagat, że Yomi organizuje nieuczciwe turnieje. Już widzę, jak Bandai Namco by na nich spojrzało. Więc tak... Jedzie mi tu tramwaj.
Obviously, they don't have a track record of doing. Or you can cheat yourself and inflate the dojo number.
Wiesz co, z Financial Hurdle, no, że musisz jednak wydać tam powiedzmy 1,500 na taki weekendzik, nie? Więc to jednak trochę jest.
Yourself.
No ale jeszcze nocleg.
Because if you don't do that, you don't have a chance in hell of being able to compete with the other part of the region that's consistently cheating these 64-player dojos when they should be, say, 32, like yours should be, and then the number one player there is going to move on to Tekken World Tour Finals when you know they shouldn't rightfully be doing that. So your only option for your community and your locals to be able...
To prawda, to prawda. Myślisz, że każdy kraj jest biedny.
To compete is to cheat yourself, because Bandai Namco doesn't do anything about cheating. They don't investigate anything, and that could be a reason why this is happening. Now, is it justification? I'm not trying to justify cheating in the Tekken World Tour, but it is a reason that certainly makes sense. When you have no other recourse and you can't trust Bandai Namco to do their job and enforce the rules, then you kind of have to take the rules into your own hands. And so if players in Greece suspect Poland of cheating, and we assume that Lock Dojo is cheating the numbers, if that's the reason for it, not only does it make sense and give motivation for it, but in my opinion...
Szczerze, gdybym ja zobaczył, że jakiś turniej u nas oszukuje, to ja bym tego tak chyba nie zostawił.
While it is wrong, it's a lot less egregious than maliciously cheating in order to game the system. Instead, you're cheating to be able to compete within a system that not only condones cheating, but encourages it because there's been no enforcement. Again, and I want to reiterate, I'm not condoning any region cheating or any dojos cheating or anything like that. And again, everything in this is alleged.
RTM,
however, this is another side of the coin that I want to point out to show that because of how dojos are handled, how the Tekken World Tour system is, not necessarily everything is going to be done in a malicious way. There are going to be other reasons for it. And even though, yes, it's wrong, it's still important to understand.
Wiesz co, on się dowalił, że jest za duża, bo ludzie są wpisywani. Tacy, którzy nie startują. Akurat wcześniej było tak naprawdę bardzo, bardzo to widoczne, bo gracze byli rejestrowani na początku listopada, tuż przed tym turniejem, w którym brał udział RF. Dodatkowo oni mieli takie niki składające się z 2 połączonych słów, które wyglądały jak wzięte z jakiegoś generatora i tego było dużo, więc on wciąż jedzie na tej narracji, pokazując inne przykłady. Przez to przekaz się trochę rozmywa, tak? No dlatego, że on mówi o jednej rzeczy, powołując się na coś innego i
that there might
raczej
be
mi
that
się
context
średnio
behind it, and there
podoba.
might be more of a deeper reason for this alleged cheating going on in the various regions than it might look on the surface. So the next region we're going to be looking at is the MEA3 region. And this might be a little bit confusing because Bandai Namco has just taken action on the MEA3 region and the #1 player in the region because of misconduct. That is not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the current #1 player after that, Yoritz. And
A tylko śmieszną rzecz powiem, czy śmieszną. On nie uwzględniał to jednego gracza, zdaje się, Heisenberga, bo on nie patrzy na pewien bardzo ważny aspekt Dojo, o którym mówiłem wcześniej przez chwilę, czyli materiałów filmowych. Jeśli chodzi o Heisenberga, który jest tam z którejś Ameryki bodajże, nie pamiętam już w tym momencie, to nie znalazłem absolutnie żadnego filmu z jego walki. Wszystkie w systemie TWT były nieaktualne. Szukałem po tych kanałach, które wrzucały na YouTubie. Nigdzie nie mogłem znaleźć.
yes, I do believe that there is still misconduct in the region even after Bandai Namco has taken action.
Tak, Oirin, zgadzam się.
So Yoritz has a couple of events here that are listed as 96-player dojos that he's won. He's gained a lot of points from these events, and they are all organized by CGC Kuwait. And all of these dojos follow a very similar pattern that really brings all of these events that Yoritz has gained points for into question. With this event, for example, there are 97 total entrants, and as you would guess, 0 disqualifications. 0.
A były dużo w 23? Czekaj. Czy nie było? Chyba, że nie było. Nie, punkty były, ale nie było chyba tego rankingu Dojo, nie? Tak, Grecy u nas byli raz w tym roku. W zeszłym roku byli na 2 turniejach w jeden weekend, zdaje się, nie? No tutaj ją dajmy. Ale co? W ogóle on się wtedy prawie dostał. Wymaksował Dojo. 625 punktów łącznie. Gdyby tu dostał trochę więcej, to wyprzedziłby Pinie i Buka. Wow. Ale wtedy już łącznie było inna liczba punktów.
Not a single one in a 97-person event, but also look at the amount of 0-2s in this. I counted the amount of games that went 1 and 2, and up until losers round 6, 4% of games went 1 and 2. In fact, I can count them for you. So here in losers, up until losers round 6, there's a total of 73 games that were played. And there is a total of, and I'm looking for them right now, and it's hard to even find them, 2 games that went 1 and 2, up until losers round 6, 2 of 73, and they both took place in losers round 2. There were 2 games that went 1 and 2 of 73. And then even into losers round 4, there's only 1 game in here that went 1 and 2. Losers round 7, there's 1 game, and then it starts to get a little bit better later on, but 2. In winners, it's a similar story. Up until top
Dobra. Yoritz.
16 in winners, there were 90 games that
Podobnie.
were played, and a total of 1, 2,
Coś czuję, że
and if I can
przewiniemy.
even find the other 2, that would be great. 3, 4. Found it. They were right next to each other. 4.
O Yondajmy właśnie będzie za chwilkę chyba jeszcze. Tak, później. Dobra, wiesz co, przejmijmy tego RTM-a. No bo Yoritz, akurat on startuje, jest legitny, no a RF też osiąga dobre wyniki. Może to nie jest argument.
So deep-rooted this entire problem is. It continues to show that even if Bandai Namco tries enforcing the rules and what is going on, there's still so many issues with how the system works, and it's so easy to cheat, manipulate brackets, allegedly, that you can't really fix the system as it is. The entire system needs to be completely upended and changed because nothing short of a
To ma swoją marynarkę, tak.
redoing of the dojo system is going to fix this, and it's only going to get worse in the future as more and more people know about the cheating. Now let's move on to a region that has blatantly violated the Tekken World Tour rules. A lot of this video has been saying allegedly they cheated, Bandai Namco should do an investigation, and part of that is because I think that Bandai Namco is the one who should be
Czemu kiśniesz?
investigating this stuff, and they should have the final say on this, and we should present the information if we see it, but also to avoid liability. But this is a case where undoubtedly, without a shadow of a doubt, there has been a violation of the Tekken World Tour rules, and the region should be punished, and the #1 player should not be going to the finals, and that is the case in the Asia 2 region with this player, RTM. And the reason for this is very different from the other reasons. The reason for why I'm saying that there has been a violation of the rules is not because of bracket manipulation.
Czepię się do... Tak. Trochę dużo.
Or DQs, it's for another reason entirely. If we look at this event, I'm sorry, I don't speak the language. Tekken Brawl Showdown. This is not a point that RTM received points for. He didn't place well enough. But it is one of the best examples of what's going on in Indonesia to show you the problem with the Asia 2 region. This is an event that had 64 players and 0 DQs. So this is where normally I'd go into the whole thing of like this bracket is manipulating the numbers. Also look and see how many 0-2s there. I mean, this had 1 in the entire pool. This had 1, 2, 3, 4, so a little bit more normal. But that's not the point.
Myślałem, że trochę więcej będzie tych bomb, prawda? Ale dobra, posłuchajmy tutaj o tym
It doesn't
regionie.
even matter. This event had 64 players because there was a cap of 64 players for the tournament. So, okay, that makes sense why it's exactly 64, and that might even make sense why there's 0 DQs, maybe. But the problem is when we go down here, this little mark means that this player does not have a Start GG account when they were signed up for the tournament. And if we look at how many players there are, there's a significant number of them in this tournament that do not have Start GG accounts. In fact, of the 64 players that attended this, I counted the
Zespół UW.
24 that are listed here as not having Start GG accounts. About a third. And this is obviously ripe for abuse. If you're just throwing in Start GG accounts like this, you're just throwing in like this player, yeah, they exist in the Start GG, then that is, I don't need to explain how easy that is to abuse if there's no like verification of this whatsoever. This means that if this event had, say, 40 players that actually signed up, then they can just throw in fake accounts to meet the 64 player cap. And this is actually one of the least egregious examples of this happening. If we go to Japan Hype, which is an event that had 92 players in it, again, we're not even going to look at the bracket, just look at the attendees. And you're going to see the same thing, where a significant number, and you can see a more...
Dobra. Jedna rzecz. To jest Bóg. Czy w sumie nie wiem, czy on
at
dostał
the
DQ.
attendees. And you're going to see the same thing, where a significant number...
Bo jeśli Bóg tam był, no to był świadkiem tego turnieju, tak?
And you can see a more frequent number of players at this
Chyba, że on też brał udział w tym, no ale...
event, look at all of this, do not have Start GG accounts. On some pages, the amount of
Nie wystarczyło po prostu mnożnik popularności na te punkty z Dojo. Wiadomo, że w takiej Korei czy Japonii, gdzie konkurencja jest potężna, punkty były cięższe. Ale jak to ustalisz? Będzie zawsze podejrzenie o kolesiostwo. Mają swojego wysłannika, problem rozwiązany, no ale... Czekaj. Schedule. Dojo All. Status All. Nie EMEA, tylko TWTSO. Dojo All. Trzy, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 712 turniejów. No z wysłannikiem nie dałoby się tego ogarnąć.
players that don't have Start GG accounts are outweighing, in fact, it might be every page, are outweighing the amount of players that do. So of this event that had 92 players, again, I counted 57 do not have Start GG accounts.
Kiedy to się o Street Fighterze, wiesz co? Ostatnio tak się zastanawiałem, czy sobie nie pograć w Street Fightera na streamach. Ale muszę o tym pomyśleć jeszcze. Zobaczę. Na razie TWT, zobaczymy co luty przyniesie. No.
57, 60% of them don't have StartGG accounts. An absurd number. This one, Game vs. Rise of the Galaxy, was even worse. This was 130.
Czyli nie mają kont StartGG źle, a jednocześnie mają konta zakładane tuż przed turniejem też źle. Kwestia sytuacyjna.
Players. 113. And again, look at all these. This was a 96 player dojo. This was listed as a 96 player dojo. Look at all of these players that do not have StartGG accounts.
Ja nie gwarantuję, że będzie Street Fighter. Mówię, zastanawiam się nad tym. Bo chcę się skupić, jeśli chodzi o streamy, na beat'em-upach. A może dodam strytka. Zobaczymy.
Total number here was 63, which was well over half for a 96-person event. Now, something that's also a little bit strange about this to point out, and I'm only going to open a couple of brackets here, is that there are a significant amount of DQs in this tournament, but
nie będziesz top 3 Polski, będziesz top 3 Europy Wschodniej.
Most of the DQs, and this is just a random one I clicked on, I didn't plan this out, are from these accounts that do not have StartGG accounts. And so one of the explanations for this might be someone arrives on the day of the tournament and signs up, sure. But if they're DQing like this, that's not what's happening. Look, that's 3 in a row, 4, 5. Well, no, this person did have an account. So 4 of these DQs were from players that didn't have accounts. So that's not what's happening either. Here's the most egregious example of this. This is J-Town Showdown Open Tournament. This was the first dojo that was attended, and this had 77 attendees, 76 players in the bracket. Look at all of it. Look at it. In this tournament, a total of 60 players did not have StartGG accounts. 60. That is more than 75%. And so why is this happening? Why is this happening? The answer is because, for whatever reason, on the StartGG page, Tekken 8 registration, click on this, link, register for Tekken 8 Japan Hype, and it leads to a bit.ly link, which leads to a Google form. These tournaments in Indonesia are using Google Forms to register competitors for their tournaments. And that is what all of these players without StartGG accounts are. Here it is for this one as well. If we go back to the homepage, register here, click on this link, it leads to a bit.ly link, which also
No dobra, ale to jest jakiś zakaz?
leads to a Google form to sign up for the tournament. Now, for some reason, this one, J-Down Showdown, doesn't have any. In fact, they haven't changed any of the information on the StartGG. It's a default StartGG page. So I don't know how players are supposed to be able to sign up for this or even like know what to. But maybe they edited the page later to get rid of the registration page. I don't know. But regardless,
Da się w ogóle założyć tak bez rejestracji?
that's why this is happening. And this is in clear violation of the Tekken World Tour rules. You are not allowed to do this. Even regardless of all of the very obvious reasons why this is a problem and why this makes it so much easier to manipulate brackets, you could have like this, a 17-person tournament where you just throw in 60 fake players and then you call it good. But regardless of that, the official Tekken World Tour rules say in the dojo.
No, wyglądają trochę jak skamoki, ale z punktu widzenia takiego, czy to jest legitne? Czy inaczej, czy Bandai Namco tego zabranie? No chyba nie.
Section. Dojo events are independently operated open offline tournament events that have opted in to be recognized as part of the tournament via an application process on the ranking website as defined below or other.
Okej, dobra. Czyli muszą się móc zapisać przez StartGG, Challenge albo Tonamela. Nie pamiętam, tam jest jeszcze jakiś system, a nawet można tutaj zobaczyć. Czekajcie. RTOs, news. A, to jest overview i ma Tekken Cup, ale z ciekawości. Czekajcie. Dobra, zobaczmy. RTOs i tutaj czy można. Jakie tu są systemy? To na. Nie ma? StartGG. Aha, czyli tutaj tylko StartGG w EMEA Tekken Cup, a do nie mamy tutaj pliku już z TWT.
Website designated by Bandai Namco Esports. Dojo events are required to use the ranking website or other websites designated by Bandai Namco Entertainment or Esports or either or to A, list a dojo event, B, take registration and see set up and record the bracket. So I highly, 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 highly doubt that all of these separate events organized by separate people have all gotten approval from Bandai Namco Esports to use Google Forms to register competitors. I don't believe that's happened. It's the only way that the non-violation of the rules. So if we assume that's the case, these tournaments in Indonesia have not used the ranking website, StartGG, to take registration. And you can make an argument that, well, that they did use it to take registration, but they also used something else. No, that's not how it works. They are using a website outside of StartGG to register competitors, and that is explicitly not allowed per Tekken World Tour rules. And again, it should be, because if this became something that was standard and anyone could do, instead of making up fake AI-generated names on StartGG, instead what you'd be doing is you'd just be putting like a Google form here so that you had some way to be able to generate reasonable doubt, and then just throw in a bunch of fake accounts onto the page and then bump up the number of the Dojo tier. Be as simple as that, and anyone could do it. And this, again, is more proof that Bandai Namco isn't looking at this, because when you look at, like, this one, for example, as soon as you see one of these, that should immediately disqualify it from being eligible, because that means this participant did not sign up through StartGG. But yet, it was listed as a 48-person event, and all of the points have been awarded, and this one wasn't because of, again, broadcast. So, to be clear, I don't think
Brakuje mi właśnie, żeby o tym
that this is
wspomnieć, ale
malicious from RTM or Asia 2. I mean, these events have been hosted by multiple different organizers across the entire season for the Tekken World Tour regional leaderboard. I don't believe that this was done with any sort of malice, and I don't believe that this was done to boost the numbers. I genuinely do believe that this is just something they do in Indonesia. I don't know why, but that's what I assume. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. I don't think that they're doing anything malicious, because, like, if they were with Japan, why is that 92 instead of 96 attendees? You know what I mean? Why would they just not put in 4 more attendees, make them non-StartGG accounts, and be like, well, we have the registration page here, so it's all legit? I just don't see that being the case. So I don't think that anyone here is like at fault. I don't think that RTM is cheating. I don't think any of the tournament organizers are cheating. I don't think they're rigging the bracket. I don't think that...
Ale to, co mnie bardzo ciekawi, i jutro może oglądając TWT odpalę czata na ekranie, chociaż to będzie na YouTubie, a może z Twitcha spróbuję spojrzeć, żebyśmy zobaczyli, co ludzie będą pisać.
Like there's any malice in what's happening, but at the same time, it's in violation of the Tekken World Tour rules. That's how it is. That's the truth. And the other problem as well is if you don't enforce this, it sets a precedent. And this is something that even if this region isn't abusing it, other regions can very easily abuse it. And if people start doing this, making StartGG players that don't have accounts, then it's going to be so much easier to inflate the bracket than just listing false DQs or whatever. So this is a real problem. This is something that should not be tolerated or condoned. Again, Indonesia, the entire region might have a reason for doing this. There might be a legitimate reason for doing this. It might just be some sort of cultural thing that they do, but it is not within the rules. And setting this as a precedent that is okay is going to cause so many problems that it simply cannot be allowed. And now let's move on from that and go to a region that you may not have been expecting to come up in this video or in the documentation. And it is a region that more of you who are watching this are in, and these tournaments you may have even gone to, and that's Europe 1. And the number 1 player in Europe 1 is Hexmark. And I just want to, again, reiterate, I don't...
Hexmark w ogóle jakiegoś Pakistańczyka, on nie wygrał z Arslanem w tym sezonie na jakimś Challengerze albo Masterze?
Think that Hexmark is cheating. I don't think he's knowingly cheating. I don't believe that to be the case. However, Hexmark's tournaments that he's gone to, the Galaxy Explosion esports tournaments, do have a lot of things that come into question when it comes to DQ reporting. Let's look at Galaxy Explosion number 30. When we go to the Tekken bracket, there are 64 entrants, and
Dawanie Tekken ID, można założyć więcej kont. Plus ktoś, kto startuje w turnieju, nie musi koniecznie mieć Tekkena, grać w Tekkena online.
As you are going to rightfully guess, there are 0 DQs and a significant amount of games that go to 0. In this bracket, for example, Pool 1, not a single game in winners goes 1-0. Not one. And this, again, is an indicator that even though we see in like this bracket and this bracket a more normal amount of games that go 1 and 2, even though we're not really seeing that on losers, even if there is one DQ that was not reported correctly because this is a 64-person bracket, that has an effect on the Dojo tier. And so every single one of these instances should be looked at through a microscopic lens, and looking at this, it does look suspicious. However, when this is just obviously one tournament, you know, it could be coincidence. These kind of things happen. So now we're going to go on to number 28, and we're going to see a similar thing. It has 97 entrants, and as I'm sure you can already guess, without me having to say anything, there were 0 DQs. And also, again, a significant amount of games that...
Ile? Czekajcie.
Number 28, and we're going to see a similar thing. It has
97, bo tam prawie 200 to było na wszystko.
97 entrants, and as I'm sure you can already guess, without me having to say anything, there were 0 DQs. And also, again, a significant amount of games that went 0-2. I mean, look in losers here. We have 1 in losers round 2, none in round 1, round 3, round 4. In winners side as well, we have none in round 1, we have 1 in round 2, and we have 1 in winners quarter. It's very unusual. Here in pool 1B, we have 0
A ja jak boomer powiem, że szkoda, że nie wrócimy do czasów, kiedy mieliśmy dużo więcej graczy w Tekkena i dało się o pietruszkę, a była pasja.
Games that go 1 and 2 up until winners quarters. In winners and in losers, we have 2 that happen in round 3. This is just very unusual behavior. But then we look at like pool A1, and we have 1 between winners round 1 and 2, and it's just, again, it brings a point of suspicion. Then we go to number 26, and number 26 has 103 entrants. And if we look, this is going to actually have DQs. You can see it has 4 DQs here, it has 2 DQs here, it has none in this, it has none in this, so it has a total of 6, which brings the entrants down to 97. And also later in the bracket, again, a significant amount of games that go 0-2. In fact, throughout all of these brackets between winners and losers round 1 and 2, there are only 4 games that go 1 and 2. Only 4 of the 96.
Dobra, powtarza się Paryż. Nie żadne noce, nie żadne Airbnb, populacja 2 miliony. To jest kilkanaście, jakieś 13 razy więcej niż Guam.
That were played, so it's about 4%, which is, again, something that we see from other events like this where they aren't reporting the DQs properly. Somewhere below 10% is the point where you start scratching your head and you start thinking, this doesn't seem right. So the fact that this has happened across 3 different tournaments establishes that there is a pattern of this happening. But is there any more definitive proof, or is it just circumstance? And
trochę mam tak, że im więcej go słucham, tym bardziej mam wrażenie, że on mówi na siłę, byle dużo mówić. Wymyślił sobie, mamy takie argumenty i teraz zobaczymy, gdzie te argumenty pasują na którym turnieju.
There is. So if we go to this one, the bi-monthly number 28, again, 97 players and 0 DQs. This tournament hosts other games. And in these other games, 2xKO had 64 players and a lot of DQs. I mean, just in winners, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs. And that's...
Dobra, brak DQ na tak dużym turnieju, jeśli to się powtarza, to faktycznie jest już podejrzane.
One pool. In the other pool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it had somewhere around 17 disqualifications in a 64-player bracket. Even Garo, Fatal Fury, 14 players and had 3 DQs. One of them, and 3 full DQs, 1 partial DQ. Street Fighter 6, same thing. This had 49 entrants, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs. So what's going on here? Because Tekken 8 had 97, which is significantly more than even the second highest 2xKO, which had 64, and it's the only game that didn't have DQs. And it's not just isolated to this one event. If we go to number 30 as well, and we look at the other games, 2xKO had 37 entrants, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 DQs on winners, and then we have the amount of DQs on losers. It's not important exactly how many, it's just to illustrate that there are DQs in these other games. Street Fighter had 4 DQs in total. Guilty Gear Strive, which had 13 entrants, still had a DQ, and Grand Blue, which had 15 entrants, also had 2 DQs. So why is Tekken 8 with 64 entrants, who has more than quadruple the amount of participants as Grand Blue, have less DQs than all of the other games? Why is that the case? Someone explain it to me. But then moving on from that.
Nie sprawdzę, czy nie grali inne eventy, no.
If we go to number 26, which we talked about, Guilty Gear Strive, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter here, but you can see, again, there's 5 DQs in here. In Garo, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DQs in Garo in a 26-person event. Virtual Fighter 5, we have a DQ, and then Grand Blue, we have 1, 2, 3 DQs. And this isn't as relevant, of course, because this event actually did have DQs, but the fact that it's comparable to, like, Garo, which had 26 entrants, because, again, we had...
Dobra. Zobaczmy, czy coś zmieni tutaj jeszcze narrację.
Qualifications are important to actually see in for like the Tekken World Tour Dojo system. I think that the admins, the organizers of this tournament, were told by the Tekken players that go here, especially because there's so many high-level players, like you see Super Akuma right here, that their tournament should sign up for the Tekken World Tour Dojo system. And they did that at the behest of the Tekken players, but then have just not really looked into the rules or anything about it, and they're just like, we're just going to let everyone do their own thing. And
Pokazuje turniej, który jest z tego roku, który miał miejsce 1,5 tygodnia temu. Może
the bracket organizers maybe are going rogue and they're not listing disqualifications properly, and the tournament organizers aren't looking into it because they have no idea what's going on. And that would explain this. And I was told by someone that went to this event that the reason this says dojo is because the tournament organizers specifically thought this would be a dojo event. But if you know the Tekken World Tour rules, if you follow the game at all, you would know there's no way in hell that this would be a dojo event, and dojo events haven't been happening for months. So that's what indicates to me that it's not the players' fault, and it's not even the tournament organizers' fault. It's some rogue.
Czyli po prostu oni nie wiedzieli, że ten turniej nie może być Dojo TWT. A, bo tu on się nazywa tak, ale może... Czekajcie, a to nie może być EMEA Tekken Cup Dojo? Nie Benelux Story Francja. O, tu w ogóle jest fajnie. Pokazali, że to zmienili. Nie jest to, o czym on mówi? Nie 2v2. To jest to. Czy ja czegoś nie usłyszałem, czy za daleko przeskoczyłem, ale to, co on pokazuje, to jest EMEA Tekken Cup Dojo, nie TWT Dojo. Może gość nie wie, że jest takiego TWT Dojo.
Players that are manipulating the bracket, and the tournament organizers probably don't even know. Now, that said, yes, it's still their fault because, like the same thing with Lock Dojo, the tournament organizer is still responsible for ensuring the competitive integrity and fair play of the tournament and the Tekken World Tour if you're part of the dojo system. So yes, they are at fault for not understanding the rules of the dojo when they're making their events dojos. But this is another case where I don't think that there is malice from the players, the tournament organizers. I think really the problem lies with a few rogue people in the bracket who are manipulating the bracket to get the numbers bigger. But I don't think that it's specific, that this is known to the players or the organizers or anything like that. Should obviously action be taking place still, though? Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, you just look at what's happening with the brackets. Should Hexmark...
Problem jest taki, że przez to, że on mówi więcej tego samego, ma się wrażenie, że on mówi jakieś bzdury. Teraz w tym momencie, gdzie to, co było wcześniej, było w wielu miejscach legitne i to co mówi teraz, podważa to, co było wcześniej.
Be the player who is going to the Tekken World Tour Finals? You know, I mean, that's another question we have to ask that's very difficult to answer, because if we look at the number 2 player on the leaderboard, hey, guess what? They attend the same tournaments. So it's an answer that I don't have for you when it comes to who should be the rightful player on Europe 1 leaderboard. But what I can tell you is I think that just this has been overlooked by a lot of people, and there's not any sort of malicious thing that's been going on from the tournament organizer or anything, which I think is very important to point out, and it's fair to point it out to this tournament series' organizers. So now let's continue on to the MEA2 region. And this is going to be a really short one. This has to do with Daime. And this is not a question of if Daime should be number 1 on the leaderboard spot or not. He should be. He should be the number 1 ranked player. He has performed very well in the region. But the problem is that if you look at
Nie słyszę go już od dłuższego czasu, no.
Daime, the number 1...
Mi już się w ogóle miesza trochę to, co on tutaj mówi. Ale dobra, zostało nam co jeszcze? Daime, ale jestem naprawdę ciekawy tutaj. Jest America 1 The Problem. To jest pewnie to, co mówił wcześniej, że ten region jest za duży. Kanada, Stany, Haiti. A tu jest i on o tym mówi jakieś 10 minut. Więc pewnie szybko przewiniamy, dobra.
MEA2 player, and you look at these events, I don't even need to explain this to you. I'm just going to click on a couple of them here. This is a 132 entrant event, and it has 0 DQs. None. It has none. And look at the amount of 0-2s. Like, look at this. This is egregious. This is ridiculous. It's just, if you've seen anything else in this video, you'll look at this and you'll be like, yeah, that is not right. Same thing here. 89-person event. Oh my God. And it has 1 partial and no other DQs, right? Same thing. Here, 131-person event. And if we go here, we click on all these profiles, and we have 1, 2, 3 DQs, 5 DQs, with that one of those being partial in a 131 player event. Like this just doesn't happen. You know, this is a very clear.
Ciekawe co będzie, gdyby Stany się powiększyły o Grenlandię, ale jedna rzecz, czekaj. Greenland Real Size, taka ciekawostka. Widzieliście, jak dużo jest Grenlandia w rzeczywistości? Tak wygląda na tej takiej prostokątnej mapie, którą mamy, a w rzeczywistości jest taka.
Case, here's another one, round 6, 109 entrants, of not reporting DQs properly. I mean, you look at the amount of 0-2s, maybe not in this bracket, you look at the lack of DQs, it just doesn't line up. And I have no doubt in my mind that Yondaime, or these events, even after you count DQs, would be 96-player events. And I have no doubt that Yondaime would be the #1 player on the leaderboard regardless. But you still have to enforce the rules of the tournament to ensure the competitive integrity and the sanctity of the competitive nature of the event. You can't just pick and choose like, yeah, well, they're probably fine, so it's whatever, we're not going to worry about it. Because if you have that, if you start picking and choosing what you do and don't enforce the rules, then that leads to a whole host of new issues. So that's why I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing this up for the sake of completeness because there's clearly something going on here. And if there was any point for contention, this would be brought up. The only reason why it's being brought so briefly is because it literally does not matter. But you can't be picking and choosing where you do and don't enforce the rules. Regardless, if they're in the clear, they still have to do the due diligence and follow the rules because if they don't, if you are just complicit and you pick and choose who does and doesn't have to...
W ogóle czekajcie. Teraz tak. Bandai Namco, bo Oyondaime jest z Madagaskaru. Czyli Bandai Namco wybrało Madagaskar być może dzięki wynikom Yondaime, a jeśli on oszukiwał, to znaczy, że Miaryzo zrodziła się z oszustwa. Lećmy dalej.
Follow the rules because it's close enough or it's good enough or it probably doesn't matter. Then that leads to a whole big gray area that there shouldn't be. You have to enforce the rules as they're written. Now, when it comes to Yondaime, it literally doesn't matter because all of these events that he attended are also attended by the #2 player. If the thing would load, you can see next level play, the #3 player. In fact, everyone in the top 10, except for Smokey, WT, and one other player in here I don't remember, are all attending only these tournaments. So it doesn't matter. And even Smokey, who is #6 on the leaderboard of 170 points, are attending these events. Heat Engager, Fianar, I'm sorry, I don't speak the language, that has the same problem. It has 37 entrants and 0 DQs, and all of the other events in here have the same thing where they're not listing DQs. And so if you also exclude people that are attending those events, all of these players are attending these tournaments, and only these tournaments up until you get to the 22nd spot on the leaderboard with nice work. And even then, the only reason why is because even though this one event that he qualified for points for got him 20 points on the leaderboard, it had 17 players and 0 DQs. But the only reason why this is because look at the 1-2s. It's more credible that there actually were no...
Więcej jedynek. Dobra, to słuchajcie, jeśli będziecie chcieli oszukiwać w przyszłym sezonie, to pamiętajcie, czasem mniejsze turnieje, dodawać więcej jedynek, konta rejestrować wcześniej. To jest mój przepis dla was, żebyście w kolejnym sezonie polecieli na finały Tekken World.
DQs for this event. But this is why it doesn't matter, because it's so deep-rooted in this entire region, just DQs, don't report them, don't matter, that it's not until you get to the 22nd spot on the MEA2 leaderboard, where if you enforce this and just strike all of the tournaments that didn't report the DQs properly like this, nice work would be the one going to Tekken World Tour Finals who has one first-place finish in a 16-player dojo, which is just absurd. So, and it's not... I don't think it's right at that point to be like that stingent where you basically invalidate the entire region. You know, like it does come to a point, and I know now I'm kind of like picking and choosing myself, but it does come to a point where it's like it's so deeper and you just kind of have to let it go. But in the future, you have to enforce this. You can't just be complicit, let it go. It doesn't work that way. And so now we finally get to the third musketeer in the cheating allegations, Noel. And Noel has been criticized for a very long time about cheating, about running ghost dojos, and I, throughout investigating all of this, look at Noel, and honest to God, I cannot say in good faith that Noel is explicitly cheating. In fact, when it comes to Noel's leaderboard placements, we discussed earlier, one of Noel's tournaments was falsely tiered by Bandai Namco themselves, and they reported the DQs properly, and it should have bumped them down a tier to 1 place. So when it comes to Noel and the tournaments Noel plays, and generally speaking, I don't think that Noel's at fault, and I don't think Noel's cheating. These claims of there being ghost dojos or that the brackets are being rigged or whatever is mostly hearsay. There's no actual evidence that points to that as a fact. And when you look at Noel's tournament placements, like if you look at Hadoken Capital Gamer or if you look at Bloody Encounter, which I'll show here in just a second, You can see that Hadoken Capital Gamer 2 has 106 entrants. And if you look at the DQs for this, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DQs. And that brings the amount of entrants, yes, to 97. But look at the amount of games here that are going 1, 2. Look, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
O, widzicie, tak jak właśnie ustaliliśmy wspólnie, że jeśli jest 1, 2, to
1, 2.
jest...
These are 0, 2s, but you still have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And these are just in winners, right? Losers as well. You have 1, 2s here and here. You have 1, 2 here with the DQs, of course. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Like you see how much healthier of a bracket this looks like than these other dojos that are cheating. That's the same thing with Bloody Encounter too. Now, Bloody Encounter only has 4 disqualifications, which is a very low number for this kind of tournament. But the other factor that would determine if this cheating is the amount of 0-2s that are also in here. And again, you can see that there is a relatively normal
Dobra, dużo 0-2. Co on tu jeszcze powie?
tier status. They don't list games as going 1 and 2. They just blatantly out in the open do these things, and it makes...
Czekajcie. Momencik. Wiem już, kogo on mi przypomina. Nie? To jest ona, to jest Bandai Namco.
it very easy to spot.
Żeby nie było, zrobił dużo roboty, tylko za mocno poszedł w tę narrację.
But if they put in even a little bit of effort into hiding it, it would be impossible to find. And so maybe that's the case with Noel. Maybe the case with Noel, and I'm not accusing him of cheating, but I'm saying it is a possibility that these events are cheating. They aren't reporting DQs, but the reporting players is going 1 and 2 to cover that up, and now it's impossible to tell. And the only way you would know is if you were physically at the event there yourself and you counted all of the people there, which no one is going to do. This is part of the problem with having a system like the Tekken Move 2 a Dojo that's based on the honor system. You can't have any competitive anything that is based on the honor system, especially when it comes to how the Tekken Move 2 a Dojos work, because it's so easy to cheat and cover it up, and it's incredible that no one has done that, it seems. But there may be other dojos, other events that are cheating and are covering it up, and we don't know because there's no way to be able to get that proof if they do cover it up. But then the other problem that comes from this is the potential for collusion. You see, Noel's team is HDG, and a lot of the players, a significant amount of the players that are in these tournaments are also on the same team, and quite a few of these events are organized by that team. So that might be a motive for why these events or these players cheat or throw their games, which is something that I have heard of before, is players throwing their games on stream to give one person points and then playing the actual game for the tournament off stream. That is something I've heard of. That is not in particular with Noel, that is just hearsay, but I have heard of it happening.
Problem w Ameryce to, co Oirin napisał, że powinno być podzielone na zachód i wschód. Ciekawe, czy trafiłeś?
Just work. And so now we move on to the last region that's going to be talked about in this video and in the documentation, and that is the America 1 region. Now, to be clear, I don't think that there's any cheating or anything that's been going on in the America 1 region, but I do
Bo to są
want to point out
Stany,
the America
a on jest ze Stanów.
1 region because it highlights a very crucial flaw with the dojo system. The America 1 region is huge. I talked about this in the beginning of the video, but it's so big that I can't compete because of the financial difficulty of it. And this is true for pretty much any player in the region.
Przecież mógłby sobie z Dojo zrobić.
Region is so damn big that in order to be able to compete in any way, you have to travel across the country throughout the entire year. You have no other choice. And the other thing about the America 1 region as well is we do not have, like pretty much every other region, weeklies, bi-monthlies, even monthlies of any sort of dojo event that is 94, 64, even 48 players. They just do not exist. We are lucky to have 16-person dojo events a lot of the time. Unless you live in a major city, then you might have sometimes like maybe every month, 2 months, or 32, maybe a 48. But in order to be able to actually compete on the leaderboards, you have to do a lot of traveling. You have to travel around the country. And if you live in Canada, good luck. You basically have nothing that you can do because all of the 96-player events are in America. So it's like if you're in Canada, it's impossible. Depending on where you are in the United States, it's impossible. And because of that, you're going to have to spend quite literally thousands
No właśnie, prawda jest taka, że mało kto będzie jeździł na dojo w innym regionie.
of dollars traveling around the country in the span of a year to even have a chance at competing at the Tekken World Tour Finals. And what this means is, unlike a lot of regions, the TOs at the biggest events in the region are all different because they're at very different parts of the country. So not only are they not going to be the same person, they're probably not going to interact with each other. They may as well be from different regions entirely. And that also means that the TOs don't have incentive to be able to manipulate brackets or manipulate DQs or anything like that. So there's no reason to label your event as like a 96-player dojo because you want like a specific player to get higher on the leaderboard or people in your community to get higher on the leaderboard. Because when you have those events, the majority of people that are going to be there are not going to be from your community. But the problem is, because of how much it costs to travel to these events in America 1.
Dobra, czyli on będzie mówił jeszcze przez 6 minut o tym.
Events. And this entire concept, this entire idea goes against the spirit of the Tekken World Tour Dojo system. There being this kind of monetary incentive for everyone to keep
Dobra, posłuchajmy, jak chciałby
dojos
to
like this is
rozwiązać,
not what the
bo
Tekken World
tutaj
Tour
ma
Dojo
jakieś
system is about.
sugestie.
But unfortunately, it's a byproduct of how the regions work, and it was inevitable that this was going to be the case. It is a complete failure on how the system works from Bandai Namco. It should never be this way, and it doesn't encourage having the best player in the region go to the finals. Instead, it encourages the player that has the most amount of money and time to be able to travel to go to the finals.
Możesz tak zrobić, tylko podpisuj się inaczej, żeby potem nie czepiał się Yomi. Nazwij się na przykład Imoj. Imoj z Gid.
It is a completely flawed and ridiculous system, and this is why I'm bringing up America 1, because America 1 really highlights this. But it's not just America 1, right? This is a problem with the entire Tekken World Tour Dojo
O
system.
Jezu, ale ogarnij to. Robisz takie turnieje, podpisujesz się innym nickiem, a potem nagrywasz film na samego siebie, tylko że nikt nie wie, że to jesteś ty. Bo jest inny nick.
When it comes to the cheating allegations in general, a lot of what this comes down to, a lot of what enables this to happen is how the regions are divided. If the regions weren't so big and vast and financially gatekept people from attending tournaments, this wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't have a problem with being able to boost one player by boosting your own tournaments. You wouldn't have this problem of the financial incentive of keeping your event.
Gdzie można zgłaszać feature do Tekkena? Wiesz co? Możesz na Twitterze napisać z hashtagiem T8report bodajże. T8 podkreślenie report. Nie wiem, czy oni patrzą na feature'y, ale nie można tak patrzeć? Okej, ciekawe. Nigdy chyba nie zwracam na to uwagi.
At a 96-player dojo, you wouldn't have this entire issue that revolves around dojo tiers, because that's what everything comes down to. Everything comes down to the tiers of the dojos and players not being able to attend events because it is outside of their range. Financially, they are not able to afford it. And again, I can tell you for myself, it's very frustrating because I cannot compete in the Tekken World Tour at all. It doesn't matter how good I am. It doesn't matter what my circumstances are. I am financially gatekept from participating in the Tekken World Tour in any way because of the financial cost of it. That's it. And because of that, I have absolutely no motivation to try competing in the Tekken World Tour. None at all. If I could compete in the dojo system, I might consider doing it, but I have absolutely no way to be able to compete. I just don't. It's outside of my reach. And it's deeply frustrating. And I'm sure it's deeply frustrating for other players as well, like in Oceania, who feel the same way, even though they're very strong players who feel like they can't compete because either financial restraints from having to spend $6,000 to travel around Australia, or because of the situation in Guam. And if you look at other regions that are a lot smaller, you look at South
Oirin może nie zna. Workwe.pl. On powinien znać, jeśli już to go work.
Korea, Japan, Pakistan, even MEA too, there's no cheating. You know this, that the regions I didn't bring up in this video or in the documentation are the very small condensed regions. And that's because everyone in those regions can actually travel to each other's dojos and play against each other. And so that means that cheating is ineffective, because if you cheat by not reporting DQs at a dojo, guess what? Everyone can go to that dojo and it doesn't matter. It matters, yes, for the global leaderboard, sure, but it doesn't.
Czekajcie. Nie mówił o innych regionach, tak? Spoko, wciąż wolę jego niż DSP na przykład. Taka Japonia. Osobny region. Załóżmy, że mamy kogoś, Kumamoto, jak się ładnie nazywa, nie? Wyznacz trasę. Nagano. Pociągiem. Nie Nagano, sorry, co ja mówię? Sapporo. Tam, gdzie jest skocznia. Nagano chyba były Igrzyska Olimpijskie kiedyś. Pociągiem 13 godzin. Samolotem. Nawet 4 godziny. No to tragedii nie ma, ale wciąż, no nie tak łatwo.
doesn't matter for the regional leaderboards, which is the main problem. MEA2 as well, there is the evidence that was outlined in here of them not properly reporting DQs, but it doesn't matter because everyone in the region goes to the same events anyway. It's because of players' ability to be able to freely travel and it being reasonable financially to attend these events that these regions are actually competitive and don't suffer the same cheating problem that every other region does. Ultimately, the dojo system is supposed to allow the best player in each region to be able to participate in the global stage, supposed to be able to represent different regions that play Tekken, but it doesn't do this. Instead, it is a mix of someone who is good at the game and your financial ability to be able to compete, or if you got lucky in where you live, where you were born. Outside of that, it doesn't fulfill that core principle
No to czekamy na rozwiązanie.
of the system. And because of that, the Tekken World Tour Dojo system is a complete
Bo ja
and
nie
utter
wiem.
failure. It goes beyond just the problem of cheating, of Bandai Namco not having oversight, of automatically looking at dojos and not verifying anything manually with a human. The entire system, the way it works, is completely rotten to its core. It does not work. It does not solve the issue it's trying to solve, and ultimately it is one of the most flawed competitive systems in any sport or esport ever. My proposed solution to how to fix the Tekken World Tour dojo system is introduce subregions. Ultimately, again, the problem of the dojo system is regions. The problem of the dojo system is how broad and vast regions are. If you separated regions into subregions that allowed players to be able to more reasonably travel to events, financially be able to afford to be able to go to different areas, this would not be a problem. Straight up. If you take Oceania as an example, and you split it into 8 different subregions, you have the different states of Australia, you have New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia. Now, I'm not familiar with Australian geography, and I know there are large swaths of Australia that have basically no one in there. So this
To czemu nie podaje przykładu Stanów Zjednoczonych?
isn't like the perfect way to split this up, and you wouldn't be splitting it up by like these individual states. You would be splitting it up by different areas that have dojos or some sort of locals, of course. But this is just to serve as an example. You would have those 6 states, New Zealand and Guam. And so now, anything that's happening over there in Guam doesn't affect Australia. So when you have Bobby, who's trying to travel around Australia, spending $6,000 and still can't compete because of what's going on with Guam and being financially gatekept from going to Guam and competing in those events, instead, he doesn't have to spend the $6,000 flying around Australia traveling. He can go to his small events if there's 1 or 2 16-person events.
Wiesz co, Kojot, a może kilka razy więcej, bo ktoś by spojrzał na stary podział administracyjny Polski.
That crop up, he can go to those, and then when he competes in his local scene within his region where it's financially reasonable for him to be able to attend these dojo events, all of the #1 players within their own subregions compete in a regional Swiss tournament, and the winner of that tournament goes on to represent the region in the Tekken World Tour Finals. And so this would solve multiple issues. Not only would this solution solve the problem of cheating as a whole, but it would also solve the problem of the dojo system not accurately representing the top player in the region. Because now you are going to have all of the top players throughout the season in the region play each other and then determine who is the #1 player, and then that player moves on to the Tekken World Tour Finals. Now, there's still problems with this. Like, for example, if you have Oceania split into all of these subregions and you have that top 8, where is it located? Where is that top 8 located? You know, that would be a question because of the financial cost of people in, say, Guam and New Zealand going to.
Stop. Dla ludzi. Ale to by wymagało od Bandai Namco zorganizowania. No to teraz policz sobie, ile to kosztuje. Zresztą w Fighterkowie, zdaje się, o tym mówiłem.
To Australia. But like with the Tekken World Tour Finals, Bandai Namco can pay for the travel. They do that for the Tekken World Tour finalists, at least allegedly they do. I've heard reports that they don't, but they should. And if they do, then it wouldn't be a problem. And if they stream these events, then that money that they make could be used to allow the competitors to be able to travel. This would also fix like America 1. And I can speak on this a little bit easier because I'm in America, but you would split America into Western America, not South America, Southern America, Central, Midwest, East. Canada, you would have all the different provinces. So you would have like Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, the other one that I don't remember, I don't think anyone remembers. And then you would have Alaska, and it'd be fine. So then the problem becomes, well, what about like Hawaii? What about all of the minor islands that are within the region? And the problem there is that they are already, with how the system is, not competing in the Tekken World Tour. Again, if you are in Hawaii, you cannot afford to go to America, mainland America, and play in tournaments and qualify. So they already basically don't exist in how the Tekken World Tour works. But the way that they could become a subregion is simply have dojos that meet a specific like player requirement. And if you do that, then boom, you can become a subregion. That's how it would work. And it would be, and that means that every single place, no matter where you are, would be able to get representation in the Tekken World Tour as well, which again is part of how the region system is supposed to work. When you eventually stream these tournaments as well for the subregions, this would be great for lead up for the Tekken World Tour Finals as well. Right now, we're sitting here in January, and October, November, December, January, the past couple of months, there has been nothing competitively for Tekken. Wouldn't it be great if there was something that led up to
Co było grane przed tym materiałem? W sensie u niego, tak? Chodzi ci o to, co on robił, że
do
jest
the
tak
Tekken World Tour
nakręcone.
Finals and
Poczekajcie, bo jak damy go na normalny speed.
having these 15 tournaments for the
Jejku, teraz
sub-regions to determine
mam
the number
wrażenie,
one
jakby
player
on był na
would
planszy
be
Dura w tym momencie.
great content for this. And in fact, they
Great
kind of did
content.
this during COVID when they had the online tournaments, kind of. But this would be fantastic for being able to fill in this extra
nie mogę z
space
powrotem?
between now and the Tekken World Tour Finals. And it would also be great for viewing for the actual regions that are competing as well. Can you imagine any of you that are in America one, or if you're in Europe one, looking at the top 8, 10, 12 players, or whoever it is
No i
in your
zepsuło
region
się.
all fighting it out against each other? Can you imagine, like in America one, you have a tournament that's just like King Ray Jr., Anakin, Victim of Ritual, all of these other players that are in the America one region fighting it out like the EWC? It would be fantastic for viewership for the Tekken World Tour. It would fix the cheating problems. It would fix the financial problems. It would fix pretty much all of the problems that the Tekken World Tour currently has. But as the Tekken World Tour is right now, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. It's ridiculous. If it wasn't a complete mess, then this video wouldn't be as long as it is, and my documentation on this wouldn't be as long as it is. There is so much going on. There are so many problems. Even with cheating, with the financial problems.
U mnie nic nie było grane, to znaczy ja dzisiaj wziąłem wolne i byłem u mamy rano. Przed streamem oglądałem przedostatni odcinek drugiego sezonu 1670, bo nie skończyłem jeszcze. A wcześniej grałem, ale to już rano, w Ender Lilies.
With traveling, with the regions, it is flawed to its core. And it's only going to get worse if this is continued.
Jak będą wyłaniać finalistę? Czekaj. Teraz ci pokażę. Nie chcę od razu tutaj. Zrobią, proszę ciebie, konkurs. Co ty na to?
To be left unchecked. I would love to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour regional system. It would give me so much motivation to actually try and play this goddamn
Sorry?
game. But I can't. I can't. I have no way to be able to compete in the Tekken World Tour. And that
No to
sucks. It's sad.
zapraszam.
I
Jutro
want to be able to
od
compete.
12.
I want to be able to do this, but I can't. So I just don't care about this game or anything that's going on with it because there's nothing I can do to stop it. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this as well. Why I'm making this video. Why I've written this article, this Google document. Why I have made this the biggest project I've ever undertaken in my life. And it's because I care. I really do. I care about Tekken. I care about the Tekken World Tour. I care about the dojos. And I care about the players that play in there. And I want it to get better. I can see a future where this is so much better than it is right now. I can see a future where this shines bright. And I hope that at one point it does. But it requires action from Bandai Namco. And I'm doing this in the hopes that this triggers some sort of action. This gets more people talking. This gets people to see just how deeply flawed this entire system is. Because it's so much worse than anyone knows. And I hope if this video showed anything, it's exactly that. How flawed the system is, how bad the dojo system is, and how much it desperately needs to be changed. Thank you all very much for watching.
Dobra, podsumowując, początek był spoko. Nawet tam kilka razy się bardzo mocno zdziwiłem, ale potem, no niestety lipa. Dużo czasu mówił to samo. Także no, mogłoby być lepiej. I co? I chyba będziemy na dzisiaj kończyli. Jutro, tak jak pamiętajcie, mówiłem, widzimy się o 12:00. Czy macie... O, właśnie, może chcecie coś napisać tutaj, zanim jeszcze się rozstaniemy. Może jakieś macie pytania? Kiedy Bamko odda nam królewiec? Czemu nam? Ej, ogarnij, jakby były te subregiony, byłaby Czechia i tam byłby też królewiec. I oni musieliby, nie mogliby w ogóle wejść do Polski, tylko musieliby przeskakiwać do tego królewca. Super, nie? Dobra, to słuchajcie, to ja się żegnam. Widzimy się jutro 12, w piątek o 10. Nie, piątek o 9:30, w sobotę o 10 i w niedzielę o 9:30. Wiesz co, mam ten film do obejrzenia na temat jakiegoś stawionego meczu na Wsołka i Burza 2. Także tak ustawiam rajdę, bo ktoś z Polski gra w Street Fightera. Więc pójdźcie tam i wspierajcie Polaka. A jeszcze żegnam, dzięki, do jutra, bajo.